If you can
Yes,
do
we
a
can
roll
hear you.
call. Yeah, so I'm struggling with network. Let's just do a roll call.
No problem, Chair. Ms. Mochikatsi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair. I'm present, Andre.
Dr. Kigaba,
Good morning, I'm present, thank you.
Mr. Mdluli, Mr. Mdluli is on the platform. Mr. Chance,
Good morning, everybody.
Mr. Thring,
Good morning, Chair. Morning, colleagues.
Ms. Nkosi,
Morning, colleagues. I'm here.
Mr. Koza,
Morning, everyone.
Mr. Mkutu,
I'm here.
Mr. Langa, I'm not sure if I called your name.
Good morning, present, Andre. Thank you.
Chair, that's all members on the platform, Chair. Others may still join us.
Thank you very much. Can we post the agenda, and then can we get someone to move and second the agenda?
Chairperson, I move for the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you very much. Seconder.
Okay, I second the adoption. I'm not sure if the roll call was done. Unfortunately, I was having problems trying to connect, but I second the agenda, and I'd like to note my attendance in the meeting. Well, my attendance to be noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then are there any apologies, Andre?
Chair, the apologies we received is from the executive chair. The minister is attending a SACO meeting. Deputy Minister Kwadlimpi is attending a meeting with the president, and other ministers also not available, Chair. And TG is also attending cabinet meetings. I have not received any apologies from members. May I still receive it, Chair? Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's a second for me. Hello?
Yes, Chair, can I please register my apologies, as I will have to hop on to another committee meeting at about 10:30. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Chair, Ms. Slaus will to just join the meeting as well, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
The purpose of the meeting today is to receive a briefing by NGP as well as the NLC on the annual performance plan for 2027. I will now allow the NGP to present, and then I want to ask Ms. Mosikasi to help me chair the meeting because my network is bad, but I will be in the meeting. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I am Lungile Tukwana, the acting CEO of the NGP. We will be presenting the strategy and the APP today. Maybe I can be assisted in projecting because I think that I have a problem on my side, or give the rights to Yvonne, please.
Yvonne does have projecting rights as well.
Please project, Yvonne, the presentation that was sent by Zanele to you. All right. Whilst we are projecting, Chair, maybe I can continue to talk until we have that projection. But today, Chair, we will cover a few areas. Obviously, we are covering the mandate of the NGP. We will be covering the overview of the NGP. We are going to be covering the governance structure, the situational analysis, but also the key issues affecting gambling regulation, and also the 2026-27 annual performance plan with the alignment that it projects to the government priorities, but also the institutional program performance that we actually have, and the financial management, as well as the revenue generating proposals that we have developed and conclude from that point. So that's the what we'll be covering as our outline as NGB. If we go to the second slide, well, if you look at the NGB mandate, maybe just to indicate that the colleagues that I'm with here, I am with the CFO and the senior manager responsible for research strategy and stakeholder engagement. So in terms of the mandate that we have from the National Gambling Act of 2004, we are responsible for the oversight of gambling in the Republic of South Africa. And we do that in relation to the conducting of the oversight evaluations of performance by the PLAs, so that we can ensure that the national norms and standards that are established in terms of the NGA themselves are applied uniformly and also consistently throughout the Republic of South Africa. But we also do it by assisting the PLAs to ensure that the unlicensed gambling activities are detected and suppressed. We also monitor the market conduct and the market share in terms of gambling in the country. We also monitor the socio-economic patterns of the gambling activity and research to identify patterns of socio-economic impact, as well as economic impact of gambling and the addictive or compulsive gambling, as we would have it. Establishing and maintaining national registers. We have national registers that we must maintain, but also we are advising and providing recommendations to the National Gambling Policy Council on among some of the issues that relate to the national policy, as well as legislation in relation to gambling. And lastly, we provide a broad-based education national program on the risks and social economic consequences of gambling in terms of the Act as it actually exists. In relation to the NGP, we will know that were established in terms of the National Gambling Act of 2004, and we are a Schedule 3A a public entity in terms of the Public Finance Management Act, as well as we are under the Executive Authority, which is the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Competition. Currently, the entity, no man, you've only projected the wrong presentation. Sorry about that, Chair. I will just continue whilst he's projecting the right presentation. So I was going to say that the gambling regulation framework is a concurrent function between ourselves as National Gambling Board and the provincial governments. So we have four modes of gambling that are regulated. Namely, we have the casinos, we have the betting, which is on horse racing and on sport. But also we have limited payout machines, and as well as the bingos. Those are the four modes that on our side we are regulating in terms of the National Gambling Act. Then, in terms of the national government, is the one that establishes and enforces the rules in relation to ensure that there is fairness, there's transparency, and there's competition in the gambling industry. But further, it sets the norms and standards for the industry to ensure that there's uniformity in terms of the laws, especially as it relates to the provinces implementing the four areas, which is casino, racing, gambling, as well as the wagering. So we do monitor those certain aspects that the provinces are responsible for. But the provinces are also then issuing the licenses. They are the licensing authorities, and they are issuing those licenses and monitoring and also supervising the enforcement, enforcing the compliance of the licensees within their respective provinces. So the NGP, I think that has achieved the 9th consecutive clean audit for the year 2024-25. We are waiting to see for 25-26, which is looking good this far in terms of getting that clean audit. Structurally, that's how the structure actually looks. There's an accounting authority, and then we have the chief executive, and then we have the four areas of the executives that are responsible for gaming control and compliance, but also the enforcement, and corporate services and research, but also finance and procurement services. Next slide. On the next slide, we then cover a few areas there. We have experienced some institutional challenges for quite some time as NGP. And those institutional challenges, it was mainly around the constraint, the areas that constrained our ability to operate as an effective regulator. One of those areas is that, as we would know, the technology has moved quite fast in comparison to our own legislation in this particular instance, which then affects our ability to exercise the kind of mandates that we actually have, because it means that the technology is ahead of us. So the issues of the online gambling are the ones that actually came up quite strongly. And it's an issue that has had an impact in terms of the coherence between ourselves as national and the provinces. I'm going to talk to that at a later stage. So these factors with the stakeholder disengagement at an earlier stage, they actually had an impact in terms of how we drive the ship as the NGP. But in response to these challenges, as NGP, we are proposing through this strategic plan that we are going to be able to restore the governance within the institution, deal with the leadership stability issues that it has actually faced, but also enforce the institutional coherence that is going to rebuild the organization's effectiveness and credibility going forward. In order to address the policy uncertainty in relation to the online related issues, we are working closely with the DTIC, which is our mother department, to make sure that we are part of shaping the future as it relates to that specific aspect. The NGP's emphasis, we have emphasized the issue of collaboration between ourselves and the PLAs, because the PLAs are an important part, as we said, that the function or is actually a concurrent function between ourselves and the PLAs. So we are fostering strong partnerships with the PLAs, and the NGP, we believe we can lead in the regulation of the gambling industry and optimally fulfill our role as NGP, but more specifically in the creation of the norms and standards that we actually mandated to do as the NGP. We're also building the stakeholder trust and also engaging, or we are rebuilding stakeholder trust and engagement with the central focus, which will be the central focus, by reintegrating and participating in the strategic forums such as the Chairperson's Forum and the CEO's Forum of the gambling sector with the various provinces, and also participating in the structures of these forums such as the Legal and Compliance Enforcement Committee. We are currently chairing the Enforcement Committee of the CEO's Forum, but also we are in the Compliance and the Operations and IT Committee. We are then showcasing our own commitment to collaborate in order to enforce the new partnerships that we would want to see. But also, Chair, we are looking at the issues of making sure that we promote a transformed and inclusive gambling sector and encouraging the participation of women, youth, and persons with disability, particularly around the issues of the ownership of those specific areas. That is why we have made some proposals, I think, to the ministry around the issue of making sure that there is a market inquiry on this matter in terms of the dominance of certain operators in the market and all of those kinds of things. Then the target, we are targeting responsible gambling and public education on the risks of gambling towards vulnerable groups, including the youth, women, persons with disability, and contribute towards the inclusion and the social protection of those ones. I will talk further on those ones as we go along. Next one. The next one, we are now talking at the situational analysis. Chair, we thought that let's have a reflection on this because it shapes how we have structured our own strategy and APP. The big issues are around the issue of the gross gambling revenue, which was sitting at 74.5 billion in 2024-25. Now, when you look at 25-26, the unaudited figure suggests that we will be sitting at about 84 billion when you look at it. That is an improvement of 30.2 year on year when you actually look at it. The betting accounts for 74% of this, which means that it has actually increased from the 52 billion that it accounted for, which was 70% in 2024-25. So once the audited figures are actually finalized, it means that we may be sitting around 74 of the gambling gross gambling revenue, as we put it. In terms of casinos and LPMs, the market share has declined for casinos from 22%, and it's sitting at around 6%. It's sitting around 19%. When you then look at the ones of the LPM, it was sitting at 6%, and now it is sitting at 5% going forward. Whilst the bingos, one of the modes that were gambling, is remaining stable at 2%. So the taxes and levies amounted to about 5.8 billion in 2024-25. We're sitting at about 6.4 billion with the unaudited figures of this financial year, of 25-26 financial year. So I thought, let me just make those points quickly on that one. Next slide. Now we're going to look at the issue of the growth in the GGR in relation to the modes, comparing it from 2022 to 2025-26. If you look at it overall, the GGR across all of the gambling modes has shown a very strong growth of about 25.7%. That was initially in 2022-23, and now it actually went to 25-26 in the subsequent year, and now it's sitting at about 30.2%. Now, one would be tempted to say that it is actually increasing, but it's increasing at a declining rate if you look at it and you're comparing the 25.7, 25.6, and going down to about 13.2%. So although the growth is there, it is growing at a declining scale. Then in relation to betting, this is the primary driver of growth when you look at it.
Recording in progress.
It's a primary driver of growth. It increased significantly from 2022-23. It was sitting at 23.7 billion. Now, if you look at 25-26, it's actually sitting at 62.1 billion, meaning there has been a high annual growth rate from 51.2%. Now it's sitting at 19.4% over that particular period. So it means that as well, it is growing, but at a declining rate when you look at it. It also influences the overall GGR that you are talking about. The casinos remained more or less stable, suggesting that it's actually a matured market. The LPMs, the GGR has been limited this far, only showing some recovery. I think that in 2025-26, and we're going to see the final figure that actually comes from there, which means that there may be some potential growth going forward. As I indicated, the bingos remained more or less stable or declining going forward. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when we look at the next slide, I think that we have seen this slide before. It's a slide that deals with next slide, Yvonne. It's a slide that deals with the work that we've been doing in relation to research. So the National Gambling Board embarked on a research project to determine the socio-economic impact of gambling in South Africa. That research was done in 2023-24. Now, the survey revealed that the prevalence of gambling at that particular point was sitting at 65.7% in terms of the respondents that were engaged in the gambling activities in the 12 months before taking the survey. Now, that was a substantial increase from the 30.6% that was reported in 2017. We are due to conduct a new study in the next few months dealing with the issue of the prevalence and the related issues. But those studies had demonstrated that there were a few areas that where the gambling was actually happening in terms of the different modes. And it was mainly at that point the National Lottery and the unlicensed gambling operations, and then the lucky draws, and then the betting. Now, I can tell you that that picture is going to change significantly, understanding where we are in the country today. So we'll be doing a survey that is going to be dealing, or a research that is going to be dealing with those specific areas, as it were. We can go to the next page. The next page, we are just highlighting a few issues or key issues that are affecting gambling affecting gambling regulation. Number one, the unlawful gambling activities are actually a challenge for us, starting with the issue around the online gambling. Now, if you look at online gambling, there's an issue of Section 11 that we actually have, which deals with interactive gambling in terms of the National Gambling Act. Now, that section prohibits interactive gambling except if authorized, unless it's authorized in terms of any other national law. So there's no other national law that has actually authorized interactive gambling. So notwithstanding this prohibition, we have seen instances where bookmakers are actually offering online gambling, and they are offering that online gambling as contingencies, which is in contravention of the Section 11 of the Act. Now, obviously, the licensing is being done by local government, or sorry, it's being done by provincial licensing authorities. And we think that that's the challenge that we are facing today, that we have to deal with, that is giving us sleepless nights as the NGP. So what we have done in that areas, we have now written a report to the National Gambling Policy Council to have this matter being deliberated on, especially around those online gambling, the issues of bet exchanges, the historical horse racing. Those aspects are the issues that are going to the next NGPC. Of course, we have made findings on a consistent basis as the NGP in relation to the PLAs and the non-compliance to the Section 11 of that and the other related issues. So the increased access through the mobile phones and the platforms has actually accelerated the illegal gambling on the illegal online gambling and the associated risk of compulsive gambling. So the national policy on this aspect is what we're expecting in the work that we're having with the DTIC in order to have that matter dealt with on the policy side. But in terms of the current act, as NGP, we are adamant that there is a current act, and that act is the National Gambling Act of Section 11 of the National Gambling Act of 2004, and it prohibits interactive gambling, and we should then make sure that it actually does not have. Hence, we are taking the matter and escalating it to the NGPC. So we have dealt with some of the issues in terms of implementing what is within our scope as the NGP on this particular matter. The issue of the increase in illegal gambling also remains a challenge. You can go to the next slide. The issue of increased illegal gambling remains another issue where we are seeing that there are external operators that are operating in our space, and those are not licensed in South Africa. And that creates a challenge of its own, because in that specific instance, they are coming from the online casinos, and they are offered from other countries. Those are licensed from Curacao, for example, Gibraltar, Philippines, and the UK, and I think Malta as well. Those have been the source of our main ones in terms of the online gambling sites that we have actually seen as the NGP. Now, what we have done around those specific areas when we actually saw them, we have engaged with the Curacao, we have engaged with the UK, we have engaged with Malta. We still have to have engagement with Philippines and Gibraltar to ask them to stop their licenses from operating in our own space. That work we have done on our side, and we have served them with cease and desist letters, so that they can be able to stop that work from happening on our side. There's been a positive response on some of them, and we are going to be engaging them further to make sure that we work together on some of those particular aspects. There has been other aspects where we have, for example, worked with the Department of Communications and CASA to look at whether we can be able to block some of the IP addresses. I think that I can say that work that is in progress this far, but I think that is something that we're paying attention on. But also we're working strongly with the law enforcement agencies to ensure that SAPS and the PLAs, so that all of us can work together in suppressing the illegal gambling that you actually see. So NGP is also working with Google and Meta in blocking the websites from identified unlicensed operators. I must say that Google has been forthcoming, especially also dealing with advertising aspects online, as well as Meta has come on board, particularly when we've been looking at other aspects like Facebook and all of those kinds of things that have been doing some of the illegal stuff. And then we are also considering what we refer to as the issue of the expression of interest, where NGB is looking at the possibility of coming up with a system that can be able to block those and be able to control that. We'll be issuing and expressing an interest on that. And then we have developed the verification of legal operators website. So there's verified operators website or web portal that we're actually coming up with, where we are basically saying that the gambling should take place in a safe space. It should take place with the legal operators, so that when we put the controls and we make sure that we monitor compliance, it becomes easier on our side as the NGP, but also we are empowering some of the licensed operators to make sure that the space where they have respected us to invest in terms of asking for licensing, they are actually getting the value for that. But also are protecting the punters that are actually gambling. We're also working with SAPRIC, FIC, in terms of making sure that we are able to confiscate unlawful winnings where we find that there is illegal gambling that is actually happening. There's progress that we are doing, I think, from the side of the Reserve Bank in relation to the same aspect. We are due to look at the MOU. We have a draft that we're actually working on. And then we have also engaged with the NSFAS with the issue of the public education, especially as it relates to gambling by the recipients of NSFAS and the students broadly. I must say that the work on this one has gone on even outside NSFAS, where we're approaching various TVET colleges, various universities, but not only those ones, also going to high schools in terms of the public education on this one. We're also receiving quite a few requests from social development. We'll be working with the social development from Northwest in order to deal with some of these issues that we're talking about. We are also talking to the Correctional Services Department. Now, this one of the Correctional Services Department is looking at their own staff, not necessarily those who are incarcerated. So we are looking at that public education awareness. So the issue of the legal framework on gambling is quite important, which we are happy that our mother department is working on it. But also want to make sure that the gambling is prioritized, illegal gambling is prioritized as a crime, so that we can be able to get the results. We were happy to learn that, for example, there was a case in Hoedspruit where people who were doing illegal gambling, who were running that illegal gambling operations, were arrested. And they were not just given a fine, they were actually arrested and given sentences. We believe that that's the progress that we're actually making on our side. On the next one, I think, is the issue of the proliferation now of the gambling advertising, which I know that all of us are concerned about. I have made some few points earlier around the gambling advertising. Now, what I must then just go straight to on this one is that we know the effect of gambling that it is actually having and normalizing gambling as a way of living. It is a very serious issue that we're actually having. Since the National Gambling Policy Council that was held in October, as NGP, we have issued what we call as a guidelines on the implementation of gambling advertising. We have issued those guidelines in November. I think it's on the 1st of November, if not 1st of December, and we sent to all of the provinces to assist us in dealing with that specific issues, to make sure that whatever gambling advertising that is going out is in terms of the law. So we have sent that one out, but further to that, we have developed the norms and standards that are relating to advertising. Those are due also to serve at the next NGPC in order to make sure that those ones go out. In that, we are actually saying that there should be minimization of gambling advertising, especially in areas where there are vulnerable groups, but also the gambling by the prominent people, I think, in society. We should seek to deal with some of those issues by celebrities and all of that. We're trying to prevail on those particular aspects with those norms and standards. And also the issue of the TV advertising. we are also talking to that particular issue around what time should TV advertising be in relation to norms and standards. And I think that is the discussion that should be at the level now of the NGPC. But I can report, Chair, that in our engagement with some of the operators, one of the things that they are mentioning to us is that since we issued that guideline in November or in December, they have actually reorientated their advertising. Their advertising is now on responsible gambling messaging. And they are taking the same celebrities that they were using and talking about responsible gambling messages. Whilst we are happy about that progress, we do believe that it's actually still advertising the same celebrities who are advertising the same product. And we think that there's more that we can do on that side. So we are continuing to engage with the stakeholders on this one to make sure that we are able to make the impact that we anticipate. So we have dealt with the issues of the compliance visits to the PLAs on these matters. We also had dealt with the issue of the Cricket SA that was sponsored by unlicensed operators. And what actually happened there is that they went and asked for licensing, and they were given licensing by the Eastern Cape Gambling Board in this particular instance. So our argument then could not continue after that because they became licensed. And also we have dealt with we're working with the advertising regulatory board and the other social media providers in order to make sure that the guidelines on advertising that the advertising regulatory board is doing are actually aligned to the norms of standards that we have dealt with. We are succeeding on that one, and there's progress. We're due to finalize our MOU as well on that one. But whatever the advertising regulatory board is coming up with now, it would have included some of the thoughts that we actually have in terms of the regulations and the acts that we actually have in the country. So those norms and standards, as I said, they are going to be reported at that level. And then the other legislative issues that we think are very important and are affecting the regulation. Chair, I must say that the issue of the finalization of the National Gambling Amendment Bill of 2018 is very important for us as the NGB in terms of strengthening our own muscle in the implementation, for example, around the issues of enforcement. It's going to be able to assist us. But also it's going to assist us in terms of dealing with the unlawful winnings and making sure that the process is not as lengthy and as costly as it is now. But also it's going to extend the monitoring of the other modes, including the casinos, including the sports betting, and not only the issue of the LPMs as it is at the current stage. So we are pleading that be taken because it's also at the core of the sustainability of NGP as an entity. The other issues is the issue of the self-exclusion register. We know that there has been work that has been done from the perspective of the DTIC on this matter, and that has actually gone out, and there is work that is currently being done on that. It's going to assist also in dealing with the issues of gambling, especially problem gambling, as it were. The LPM regulations, we have done a research on the issue of the LPM regulatory considerations. We have done our part in terms of the research, and we have given that to the DTIC to ensure that then there's progress in terms of the review of the LPM regulations, as it were. I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Yvonne Kwenure, who's going to take us through the APP and the targets. Yvonne?
Thank you, Lungile, and good morning, members. So in terms of our NGB indicators, basically our outcomes, we have tried to align them with government priorities with respect to the National Development Plan, the MTDP strategic priorities, the National Industrial Policy priorities, as well as the alignment with the growth path, as well as the gains pillars. So the first outcome as an entity deals with jobs created for industry needs and economic competitiveness. This is directly linked with our National Central Electronic Monitoring System, operator. So we have endeavored to create jobs through the appointment of a service provider to run this system for us. And the intention is to essentially measure it through the number of jobs that would then be created, which is 30, set at 30 for the year. The next outcome is centered on increased revenue generated, specifically in the LPM industry, which is the limited payout machine sector. We have zoned in on this mode of gambling simply because it is the mode that we as national have monitoring capability over in real time through this National Central Electronic Monitoring System. And so the revenue that would have been generated through this sector is then what we have targeted as an outcome as well as an output. And the intention is then to measure the rand value that is generated through the LPM sector. We've also endeavored to create further jobs through the appointment of interns in our organization. So we've also targeted job creation through internships, as well as centered on youth through youth jobs. And so we are also measuring the number of youth that the entity has employed as a contribution towards the capability of the state. Our next outcome is also on the commitment to procure local goods and services to contribute to the local economy for sustainable growth. And here we have targeted total value committed to procure local goods and services with a target to measure the percentage total public procurement spent on local producers. Chairperson, we have also, as an entity, in fact, as all entities of the DTIC, this year we are specifically targeting this MTDP period, we're specifically targeting BBBE compliance within the entity. And so our outcome or 5-year target linked to this outcome is that in 5 years, we would have achieved a BBBE level of 3. And to do that in the interim or in the MTEF period, we have targeted to spend 60% of our total public procurement on goods and services, specifically from Black-owned entities. Aligned with our mandate, one of the outcomes is to ensure that there's a compliant and uniformly regulated gambling industry. And here we have specifically targeted the percentage provincial licensing authorities, Section 33 oversight evaluations that would have been completed. And the intention is essentially to complete 100% of oversight evaluations of the PLAs with respect to compliance and uniformity within the industry. Again, aligned with our mandate to monitor market share and market conduct, as well as determine socioeconomic impact of gambling. We have targeted that we will measure market share and market conduct for the 4 sectors of the gambling industry that we essentially have jurisdiction over with respect to regulation. In the form of then producing gambling sector performance trend analysis in terms of that Section 65 of the NGA to inform regulation. We will also conduct research to inform further regulation with respect to socioeconomic impact of gambling in the Republic. Our mandate for a broad-based public education program is also crucial here. So we have targeted, our outcome here is to increase public awareness to educate and inform people on the risks and socioeconomic impact of gambling. And here, our aim is to implement our broad-based public education campaigns on the socioeconomic impact of gambling and as well as its risks through face-to-face interventions across South Africa, both in the rural, urban, and peri-urban context, as well as also to leverage of other types of campaigns through mass media in order to reach a wider target audience. We also have the mandate to evaluate limited payout machine applications that exceed 5 machines. So our intention here is to reduce the turnaround time that it takes for us to evaluate the limited payout machines, with the intention of obviously contributing to increased capability of the state or in terms of service delivery. And so we have targeted an output of evaluating these applications in excess of 5 machines within a prescribed 30 days of receipt of complete information. We also have a mandate in terms of Section 16 to forfeit winnings that emanate from unlawful gambling activities. And so we have also targeted to ensure that we have reduced the turnaround time taken to complete such investigations on illegal gambling activities, with the intention to basically investigate those winnings within 23 days, given complete information. We've also targeted protection of the gambling industry by way of actions, specific actions to combat illegal gambling. And these enforcement actions involve raids undertaken, as well as notices issued in order to curb illegal gambling, or combat illegal gambling rather. The next outcome, then I will get into institutional performance, which is centered on each of the divisions that make up our entity. So it's the Gaming Control and Compliance Division that will then deal with specifically the jobs created for industry needs and economic competitiveness, which is those jobs that I've indicated would be aligned to the appointment of the NSEMS operator. Increased revenue generation. We have endeavored to then meet a target of 2.5 billion revenue generated in the LPM sector. With respect to compliance and uniformity within the regulated gambling industry, our intention for the year is to then complete 100% of the evaluations for compliance of the PLAs. And then lastly, our intention is to complete 60% of the applications received with respect to limited payout machine applications that are in excess of 5 within 30 days. The enforcement division is then specifically responsible for the unlawful winnings investigations, which will occur within 23 days. That's the target for our turnaround time. And then we have targeted to complete 16 enforcement actions that are specifically targeted at combating land-based illegal gambling through raids, notices issued. And then we have also specifically added a new target here that deals with illegal online gambling websites identified for blocking by the relevant authorities that have been alluded to earlier on by the ACEO that we are working with. And so our target here is to ensure that by the end of the year, we have at least identified and blocked these websites in lieu of the illegal gambling blocking system that we intend to issue an expression of interest for, which is the next output, where we want to issue specifically an expression of interest so that we can have an illegal gambling blocking system that can essentially assist us in combating these illegal online gambling websites that target South Africans. The next output is the collaborated efforts with other agencies, because in this area, we rely heavily on working with other agencies such as the South African Police Service to then target or combat illegal gambling. So the intention here is to essentially ensure that we have those collaborative efforts, at least 4 by the end of the year. The Corporate Services and Research Division is then responsible for driving the capable state outcome, whose outputs are job creation. So here like I alluded before, we have targeted 5 jobs through internships, as well as 10 youth jobs. The intention is also then by the end of the year to have an annual gambling sector performance trend analysis so that we can then provide data-driven insight on market dynamics within the gambling industry for informed decision making. Our intention is also then to conduct a research project that will be centered on measuring the impact of the gambling industry, specifically prevalence rates of gambling as well as problem gambling, so that we can be informed in terms of policy where we can intervene as a regulator to ensure that gambling takes place in a balanced format that allows us to realize the economic gains against the negative social consequences. The next one is then increased public awareness. Again, the Corporate Services and Research Division is responsible for this area, targeting mainly face-to-face broad-based public education campaigns across the nation, as well as 80 other broad-based public education campaigns through other means such as mass media, TV, radio, as well as our social media platforms, just to ensure that we're able to reach as wide a target audience as we can with the message around responsible gambling and the risks associated with it. Lastly, our Finance and Procurement Services Division is then responsible for the commitment to procuring from specifically local goods and procuring local goods and services from the local producers. And here we have targeted that we will spend 70% of our total procurement on local producers. And then the last one is then that BBB compliance. So in an endeavor to at least reach a BBB level of 3 in the over the next MTDP, our target for this year is to ensure that we at least spend 60% of our total public procurement on goods and services from Black-owned entities. I think I will hand over this part to the CFO to take us through the financial management. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. I think in terms of the MTF period and our revenue that's generated coupled with the expenditure, from a revenue generation perspective, NGB has two main sources of revenue. The first one being limited payout machines in the form of monitoring fees that we collect from the LPM industry, and that's expected to generate around 82% of our total revenue. The second source of revenue comes from grant funding, which is expected to generate around 14.6% over the MTF period. The balance of the revenue is a much smaller portion, and it's derived from interest coupled with rental income, which approximates around 3.4%. From an expenditure perspective, the biggest expenditure item relates to professional and consultancy fees, which is linked to the limited payout machine industry, and that's within the region of 75%, and that goes towards the NSAM's operator and payments that we make to the operator for ensuring that the system is operational throughout the financial years. And the next cost item, which is around 20%, is our employee costs. Next slide, please, Yvonne. Okay, from a long-term financial viability perspective, we've conducted a financial viability assessment, and this was done over a 10-year period to determine how viable and sustainable the organization will be in the foreseeable future. And the projections basically tell us that the entity in future financial years will incur deficits. And measures need to be implemented to ensure that this does not occur. And as an immediate mechanism, we envisage that we can alleviate some of the financial pressure on the entity by extending the concept of NSAMs to other modes of gambling. And this was set out in the National Gambling Amendment Bill of 2018. So if the bill is enacted, then this will be seen as an immediate source of relief to alleviate the potential deficits that we would incur. Other areas of potential revenue sources, we've identified two. One relates to the blocking of illegal gambling, online gambling sites. And I think my colleagues have touched upon that. So coupled with the blocking of sites, there has been a tax proposed bill by National Treasury, where they envisage a 20% tax rate that would be implemented against illegal gambling operators, particularly on the online platform. The second area to alleviate or to generate revenue for us is seen from the advertising tax perspective, and this would be against gambling operators, where we envisage implementing a tax on advertising. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair. I think just in conclusion, maybe, Chair, I can just mention a few things. That number one, obviously, the issue of technology is something that is actually giving us sleepless night as the NGB, and that increased access to technology. It is actually one of the aspects that expands the issue of the proliferation of gambling. Hence, our approach to deal with the issue of the blocking of the illegal online gambling, and also developing that verified operators portal that you actually spoke about. In fact, one of the other aspects that we will have to be dealing with here, and we're discussing that issue with some of the banks, is around the issue of the gambling vouchers that are very prominent. We are currently discussing that matter and our structures of the CEOs Forum with a view to take the process forward and to prevail on that specific aspect. Soon enough, I think that we'll be dealing on that issue. And then the other issue is that the gambling requires a multi-stakeholder approach to ensure that there's effective regulation. Now, when you say effective regulation, you must also remember that we must balance the economic gains that gambling actually presents. I think that the previous figure that had suggested that we have about 33,000 jobs that are in the gambling sector. It may be more, a little bit more this year when we get the final figures. But at the same time, we should be concerned about the issues around the negative consequences of gambling, especially problem gambling. And that requires partnership between society in general, the NGOs that we actually have. Hence, we're working with the Responsible Gambling Foundation now, and the NSFAS and all of those ones to make sure that we manage those particular aspects and deal with the issue. And then the other one, the issue of the National Gambling Amendment Bill of 2018, it's quite vital for us, as I have indicated before, in addressing some of the shortcomings that we are actually realizing now going forward and dealing with some of those particular aspects that we have identified, especially around the issues of online gambling, advertising, and also the enforcement limitations that we come across in a way. So we do hope, Chair, that the presentation addresses some of the challenges that we're experiencing currently in the implementation of the mandate of the NGB. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation from the NGB. Can we now proceed to the second presentation of the NLC?
Good morning, Honourable Chair. Good morning, honourable members. I'm trying to share my presentation. It says I'm disabled from sharing.
You've got rights now.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. I'm pulling up the presentation. Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, honourable members. I'd also just like to acknowledge the board chairperson of the National Lotteries Commission, Professor Barney Pichana, board members Ms. Beryl Ferguson, Ms. Precious Mvulani, and Ms. Irene Ramaphola, who serves as the DTIC rep on the National Lotteries Commission's board. Just going to present our strategic plan and our annual performance plan. It's premised on our legislative mandate as being the sole regulator for all lottery schemes and sports balls in South Africa. And we do this to ensure fair play and player and public protection. We're also the stewards of the National Lotteries Distribution Trust Fund, where we manage and administer the fund. We safeguard public money that's generated from a percentage of each ticket that is sold. And this money is then used to disperse in a transparent and expeditious manner to registered NPOs and worthy good causes. We have quite a huge impact in terms of our role on the national economy in 3 areas that we've identified: sustainable funding, so revenues go directly into NPOs and critical community projects. And this serves as a mechanism for social upliftment, poverty alleviation, and this is done across all 9 provinces. We also look at the number of jobs, particularly infrastructure developments like early childhood development centers, sports facilities, localized projects that directly and indirectly contribute to thousands of temporary and permanent jobs. And then we also have a very strong focus on looking at illegal lottery schemes, which ensures that the formal economy is protected while the operational goals align with the 7th administration's MTDP. Just in terms of where we are from a governance and a management health check, in terms of governance oversight, we have all of our statutory board committees are fully established. They've got charters, terms of reference, and we've institutionalized our quarterly performance reporting. From financial governance, there's full compliance with the PFMA. We've been able to strengthen our internal reporting and our control systems, and there's a clear accounting framework with continuous internal audits taking place. From a risk point of view, it's a dynamic enterprise-wide risk register. We have a strategic operational risk register. Business continuity plans are all in place. Also, highly robust fraud prevention policies, as well as very rigorous oversight from our Audit and Risk Committee. From a culture perspective, there's been an uncompromising tone from the top in terms of ethical leadership from the board and the executive management, strict adherence to policies, and where policies are not adhered to, consequence management is implemented. And then we actively look at looking at staff morale as part of our daily operations. We've been able to reset the NLC, our foundation, and the 2026-2030 strategic cycle is a defining chapter for us in terms of how we're wanting to transform the National Lotteries Commission. We've aligned to the National Development Plan and strict adherence to the Lotteries Act to build a trustworthy institution where our primary focus is service delivery. The medium to long term, the board has looked at 5 strategic priorities. These are in addition to the legislated areas that we disperse grants in, which is arts, culture, national, natural heritage, sports and recreation, charities, and then there's a small percentage that goes to miscellaneous. And the board has indicated these are the key priority areas. So the first one is around education and family, looking at family cohesion, early childhood development centers, a big focus on youth not in employment, education or training, combating gender-based violence and femicide. It's a critical priority for the National Lotteries Commission, looking then at rural development, how our reach extends and how we can actually make a difference in communities that really need help and support. Big focus as well is on food security. Recent study by the Food Forward SA said highlighted the need of food insecurity in South Africa. And so projects are being taken to the board in the next few months around how we can actually make a difference in terms of food security across all provinces. These are our annual performance plan targets. We have 3 programs. The first program is business administration. The second program is regulatory compliance. And the third program is grant funding. In terms of our mandates, we need to reach South African citizens through education and awareness, and we've got a target of 30,000 people through our education and awareness engagements. We share information about the lotteries, society lotteries, how the lotteries can benefit and uplift communities. A big focus of our work has also been ensuring that we are transparent and accountable to the publics that we serve, and we publish all of the grant payments on our website within 10 days of the end of the month. 90% of grants are also paid in line with the regulated 60-day turnaround time. So these are the grant disbursements. It's not our supply chain. That is in terms of the PFMA, and that's the 30-day turnaround time. But these are strictly in terms of grants. A central target is also to improve our overall B status and looking at obtaining a level 3 B verification. Part of our commitment to transparency, accountability, clean governance and ethics is around the implementation of an anti-bribery management system. We believe we're the first public entity who's driving this anti-bribery management system. It's an ISO standard, and we would like that to be fully implemented at the end of this current financial year. Then in terms of regulatory compliance, we monitor the percentage of lottery schemes in compliance with the Lotteries Act. Recently at the Comrades race, we observed a draw for the Toyota Amabedi Bedi winner car competition. One of the other big society lotteries that we also regulate is the National Sea Rescue Institute. And so this is seen as a source of funding for NGOs, NPOs. We also monitor on a quarterly basis, well, monthly, and report on it quarterly, the compliance to the National Lottery and Sports Pools license conditions. So it's the conditions that the board, that the minister has agreed to with Sizakaya, and that's monitored and reported on. And then looking at measures to increase the uptake of society lotteries, we're wanting to implement 70% of the recommendations from the research that we've conducted on society lotteries. We believe that this is a fundamental instrument that can ensure sustainability of NPOs. And this is what we'd like to drive. So we did some research regarding this last year, and we intend implementing that in this current year. Then in terms of the grant funding sub-program of the National Lotteries Commission, we've set ourselves some targets around our research-based funding. So applications, NPOs can apply for funding in 2 ways. One is in terms of application-based funding, and the other one is via research-based funding. So the priorities that I had articulated early in terms of food security, youth not in employment, training or education, that those are the driving themes under research-based funding. So we'd like to take 6 concepts to the board in this financial year. These are typically projects that have a national impact. They are innovative and can drive jobs and would then be aligned to one of those strategic priority areas. We continue to monitor all funded projects. When I started in this role in 2023, it was being sampled around 20%. And what we've been able to do subsequent to that is ensure that we monitor all eligible funded projects. One, to ensure that money is going where it says it's going, but also more importantly, to pick up needs from communities. So recently the board has gone to Limpopo on an oversight visit. We visited the Noah's Ark home, and we were able to verify for ourselves the impact of the funding that we've made. Job creation is a central target that we monitor, and we look at that very closely. So we look at the jobs created or retained by our funded grantees, the lottery operator, as well as society lotteries. We also are aiming to adjudicate 80% of our applications within 150 days. This is also a regulated target, and it allows us to track the progress in terms of how quickly we're processing applications. The percentage of DDM districts in which we conduct our capacity building. So we said we'd like to conduct these capacity building programs in at least 50% of districts within the DDM. And we are looking at areas. We're now sitting on data. So when we're doing these capacity building programs, we are able to target areas that we haven't reached previously. The same is with our education and awareness campaigns. We now have access to data through our online application system where the beneficiaries are who haven't been compliant and who haven't been able to successfully apply for funding. So when we're doing the education and awareness excuse me, we actively go back to those organizations that have been declined, and we work with them in terms of ensuring and enabling them to become compliant. And then in line with the DTIC priorities, the Minister has requested that we also look at funding 3 interventions in strict alignment with the DTIC's priority sectors. And so this is the work for the NLC for the 26-27 financial year. Obviously, this is supported in enormous detail by the annual operational plans for each of the divisions. Moving then on to our budget allocations. This is just a snapshot of where the money goes. So you'll see the bulk, 72% of our budget, roughly around 2 billion rand, goes to our grant funding program. So this is the active disbursements of the National Lotteries Distribution Trust Fund. 26% goes to the business administration. This houses all of our support services, our shared services, ICT, human capital management, strategy, internal audit, risk management, finance is under that program. And then program 2 is regulatory compliance. Around 60 million of that looks at the enforcement of the license agreement, looking at illegal lotteries, society lotteries, and doing also education and awareness. Then in terms of our medium-term revenue and our CapEx projections, these are obviously based on us in terms of the license agreement with Sizakaya, getting 29.5% VAT inclusive, which is the percentage we get from each ticket sale. And so our total projected revenue is around 2.9 billion this year, 2.5 going into the NLDTF for grant disbursements, and then interest and sundry income is around 283 million. Our expenditure, we're also projecting to be around 2.9 billion, and then 89 million for CapEx. And then these are obviously projected throughout the medium term, as indicated on the screen. In terms of reparations, we can report that this was a project that we had, well, not a project, it was an initiative that we had implemented with the assistance of independent experts, professional advisors, looking at a range of possible interventions. I think it's critically important to highlight to the committee that we've done this without a commission of inquiry. And so we've had to basically start this process from scratch to determine what is appropriate, what is within the purview of both the PFMA and the National Lotteries Act as amended. And so the scope was refined to focus specifically on current and former employees who were affected. There are a number, and I think we're currently standing at around 23 infrastructure projects across the country in various stages of disrepair. And we are working with those communities in terms of a medium to long-term plan to refurbish and repurpose those properties. Some of the delays around that relate to actual community engagements. In the Northern Cape, we've been engaging with the community, I think, for the last 2 years, and we haven't yet been able to conclude on that. And I think the unfortunate part of that is that some of the actors who had been involved, or the individuals who had been involved in the SIU processes, are still in those communities and are subverting efforts to address that. So in terms of our reparations initiative, it's been concluded, settlement agreements are being implemented. However, the community infrastructure processes, those are being processed as part of our normal operations plans. A couple of key risks is around litigation. We often get taken to court. Obviously, as part of the SIU processes, a lot of time is spent supporting the applications that the SIU makes. And so what we have done to mitigate that is that we've been able to ring-fence a very robust budget dedicated to defending the NLC, particularly against frivolous interdicts. And we've been discovering that we go through a disciplinary process, for instance, relating to a colleague within the NLC, and then there's forum shop, and they take us to a range of places and spaces, and we have to then go and defend that. Then I think just in terms of reputational damage, the SIU, I think they have presented to the portfolio committee previously. They've informed us that they have around 690 allegations that they are still investigating. And so we have to build and transform the NLC while this is happening in parallel. And so we have a policy where which is very transparent. We publish the details of all grant beneficiaries, the amounts, the projects, where those projects are. And what we do find is that some individuals do come to us and say to us that, that money wasn't spent as intended. And because of the extension of the proclamation, if it falls within the in the period, I think it's up to October 2025, we then hand that over to the SIU. One of the threats that we constantly manage, and our CIO, Ms. Shabalala, is really seized with this, is looking at cybersecurity. And we've moved our focus from a reactive posture to a very proactive, continuous stance. So we do regular penetration testing through independent third parties. We train staff on phishing. In fact, in last year, and she only told us this afterwards, there was a deliberate email with a funny link sent to us just to test us as staff members to say, oh, you've been given a bonus, click here. And I think our CAE, our Chief Audit Executive, immediately picked up on that and posted on a few of the groups to say, guys, there's a funny email going around, alert the CIO and ask her what's happening. And so afterwards, she then acknowledged to us to say, no, I was just testing you to see whether you are actually awake and paying attention to this. So those are the ongoing training that we do. We've also implemented a zero trust architecture across our core grant management systems to ensure that our systems are as robust as possible. Then in terms of our previous audit results, there was some control deficiency in terms of grant oversight. And what we've done is we've overhauled our monitoring and evaluation framework. So we're now moving to tranche-based funding, particularly around large projects. So they are linked to verified physical milestones rather than a single lump sum upfront. We do physical verification. So we go out and actually check whether projects are existing. And what we've been able to see through our M&E approach is that the number of projects that don't exist, that's been declining. And so for us, it's a very good indication that our controls, our internal controls, are actually working. And then We also spend quite a bit of time in terms of capacity building. So looking at civil society umbrella bodies to help smaller MPOs build their reporting systems, their financial capability, and thus we are able to assist in reducing unintentional non-compliance. We were also asked to present on some of the unmet targets. So for 24-25, we had 3 targets that we hadn't met. It's related to our modernization, the Tutuka platform that we were building. And so in terms of 25-26, which is unaudited, we wanted to go out on an ERP, and I think just some of our internal processes haven't aligned to that. So we've that remains as an unmet target. However, in terms of the 60 days payment turnaround time in 24-25, it was unmet. However, 25-26, and we'll report on this when we come back to the portfolio committee once the Auditor General has looked at our annual financial statements, as well as our annual performance report. So we've achieved 88% of grants paid within the regulated 60-day turnaround time against a target of 70%. And then the 150 days target, we've achieved that, where we've paid, we've been able to process applications 92% against a target of 80%. Chair, members, NLC Chair and board members, that then concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Let me just check with the board chair if you also want to come in before I give over to the honorable members for questions.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Honorable Chair. I really wish to underline the work that is being done by the Commissioner and Executive of the National Lotteries Commission in what was, in my view, a very hectic and very busy year, both internally within the structures of the organization, schemes to actually improve where we had failed previously, and building a cohesive, ethical organization. I think by and large, we're not perfect, but we have a sense that the organization is improving. Last year, the Commissioner hasn't said this, we had a very important event. We really do believe that Indaba that was held in Gauteng last year in November, I think it was a very important gathering of all the stakeholders of the National Lotteries Commission, out of which, and during which, if I may say so, and during which we were able to table and present a 10-year strategic plan about who we are and what we can achieve and how we intend to drive developmental projections of the National Lotteries Commission, and some of which the Commissioner has reported on those strategies that we have adopted into our strategic plan. So we really do feel that thanks to the team that the Commissioner leads, and thanks to the members of the board in their totality, the National Lotteries Commission has made enormous progress to really serve the people of South Africa, in particular, those who are most needy and vulnerable. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Please receive my support and endorsement of the report of the Commissioner, and indeed my colleagues on the board who are here at the moment. I think it's fair to say on behalf of my colleagues that we're looking forward to the announcement of a new chair of the board in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Much appreciated. Andre, can I check with you? Is there any other presentation or is it only the two presentations?
Ms. Motsikatsi, there's only the two presentations. It's now time for members to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, can I give over to you, honorable members, for questions?
It's the chance. I don't see any other hands, Chair.
Mr. Chance, you may proceed, and then what you will indicate to me if there is any other hands.
I will do so.
Thank you very much, Acting Chair. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the presentations, which were very informative. And certainly since this committee was formed a couple of years ago, there seems to have been some significant improvements in performance, which is gratifying. I'd like to just start by raising a question, which is not really for this committee, or at least for this group of people to answer, but I want to just put it into your minds or heads that it seems that when the legislation governing the gambling boards and the Lottos Act were put into place, the two were really fulfilling very different functions. The first one, the National Gambling Board, was essentially to introduce legal gambling in this country through casinos, and obviously the limited payout machines and horse racing and so on. And the Lotto was set up to be a means of funding good causes. Now, since that time, the disparity between the income earned by the Lotto and the income earned by the gambling operators has increased dramatically, to the point where now the gambling operators and the betting operators are generating tens of billions of rands and probably similar amounts of profits, whereas the Lotto has been fairly steady, although there has been an increase. And it seems to me that the country is missing out here, that there is an opportunity for the gambling operators the betting operators to contribute to the distribution of funds to good causes. And I just want to put that out as a thought. It may be something that this committee would have to discuss between ourselves. I'd like to get particularly the view of the chairperson, Barney Pachana, on this. He's been around in this job for a while, but also others, to get your views on whether you think that is something that we could look at. Obviously, it would require changes to the legislation. Some people have even suggested that we actually have a single piece of legislation which covers the Lotto and gambling operations, but that would take more time. But turning to the specifics and starting with the National Gambling Board, you'll recall that the former CEO, acting CEO, Caroline Congra, resigned under dubious circumstances in July last year after a forensic investigation found that she had there were certain irregularities regarding her travel. I'd like to get some input, please, from Ms. Matamela from the department as to what were the circumstances of her departure and were there any consequences for that in terms of any legal attempts to recover funds. Then it's interesting what the acting CEO, Lungieli Dukwana, was referring to as the slowdown in the growth of gambling revenue, which is quite significant. And I'd like to get his thoughts on why you think that has occurred. You know, the growth of 25.6% in 24-25 down to 13%. Do you see that trend continuing? Is it related to cost of living factors, or what do you think is causing that? And do you think that that decreasing trend will continue? The report that you referred to the National Policy Gambling Council on the prohibition of online gambling. Could you supply the committee with that report, acting CEO? Because it would be important for us to form a full view on this matter, that we have insights into the National Gambling Board's particular views on this. And also, the overseas territories that you referred to, you said that you're making progress, but have you actually had responses from these overseas territories to ban these operators, illegal operators of online gambling sites? I find it a bit odd that you have a target to close down 10 illegal gambling sites. Why would you only want to close down 10? What if there are 50? Wouldn't you want to close down all of these people? Surely that indicator should just be to close down all illegal sites, not to restrict it to a particular number. Then when do you expect to issue the expression of interest on the illegal gambling blocking system? It does appear that this is a very important development. And are you going to be talking to international entities? Because it's quite likely that there will be other countries that have got a similar system in place already. Then again, I would like us to see the advertising guidelines that were sent to the National Gambling Policy Council in November. Something that you didn't touch on was the National Responsible Gambling Foundation, but do you think that it is succeeding in its mandate? Is the levy that is funding it sufficient to do the work that it has to do? When I met with them last year, they seemed to be struggling. Their call center was overwhelmed, and they seem to have a great deal of people who are not getting the sort of attention that they need to. I'm talking about gambling addicts. Then turning to the CEO, the CFO, most of the revenue does come from monitoring of LPMs. She says that there are going to be deficits in the future. When do you think those deficits will actually arrive? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? And then in terms of the tax, the 20% tax, I'd like to ask the National Gambling Board executives, if it was you, the National Gambling Board, that approached Treasury to recommend the tax as a source of revenue, not just for the fiscus, but also for the board itself. And what is your view on that tax? Obviously, that paper that was, or that gazetted proposal has not been implemented yet, and we're waiting to see from Treasury what sort of response it had. But do you think that that tax is justified, and how much of that tax would be necessary to prop up your own finances? Okay, then turning to the National Lottery Commission, an era of renewal and integrity, certainly that is a worthwhile goal. I see under the 5 strategic priorities that sports is not included. Is that significant? What is the particular reason for that? And then again, the anti-bribery management system. You mentioned that you're the first that you are aware of, but it would be interesting to be absolutely correct about that, just to be certain that there isn't something that another system operator or lotto operator hasn't already implemented. Are you absolutely sure that this is the first? If so, that is a good thing. Then I'd like to know if all the distribution agencies are fully staffed. And there was a notice in the report that there was a new distribution agency that's going to be formed. What will that distribution agency do? What will its focus be? Then the revenue projections. There's a big increase from 2.9 million to 4 billion in the 26 to 27 financial year. Is that because of Sizikar Holdings' change of operational procedures? Or what is the reason for that increase? Because it's a big jump. It's about a 25% jump in that particular year. Then turning to the reparations issue, excuse me, which, as you know, I've been plugging away at for some time. The 23 infrastructure projects in disrepair due to corruption. Can we have some details of those, please? Because we'd just like to know that there are, all of the affected institutions that have been suffering from this corrupt activity are actually being looked after. And Chairperson, I did write you a letter last week. You probably saw it, requesting the Reparations Committee's report to be submitted to the committee. It was something that you did say would be done, but it hasn't been done yet. And we know that the reparations issue presented to you with some challenges from a legal perspective, but I'd like to suggest that this is something that needs to be looked at more broadly in the department for handling whistleblowers, because whistleblowers are not getting fair treatment, I believe, throughout this country, and there needs to be a mechanism that is accepted at a cabinet level as to what processes should be followed to redress or to provide reparations for whistleblowers. Just on that point, how many former employees were actually affected by this process, and how many have been included in the reparations? I see that there's about R1 million budgeted for reparations. How is that money going to be spent? Then, what about the stalled projects where funds were looted? There's one in particular. There was, I think there's an old age home at Marapiani, which had an application rejected. Why was that application rejected? And what are the plans for the stalled projects? The legal costs, I think 70 million or something like that. It's a huge amount of money. Can you give us a breakdown of those legal costs? What are they going to be spent on? I mean, some of it's going to be reactive, some of it's going to be proactive. Presumably you can't budget for reactive legal costs because you don't know who's going to take you to court. But it would be interesting to know what the breakdown is. And then how many people are employed in your legal department? And what do they actually do? How many qualified attorneys are there? And have you beefed up that department significantly the last year, or are you planning to beef it up? And how much of the costs are actual procured costs or services from legal firms? And how are you going about selecting those particular legal firms? Then finally, the appointment of the new board chair. You did refer to that, Professor, but I'd like to get some input from the department, maybe yourself. Do you have a date by which you are planning to retire? Will there be a handover period? And if so, how long will that handover period be? And then just again, going back to the department, the appointment of the board of the National Lottery, of the National Gambling Board. How long is that going to take for that board to be appointed? And then more broadly, in terms of the legislation, I met with Minister Tao earlier this year. I think Ntombi was in that meeting to discuss the private members bill, the remote gambling bill, which I suggested to the committee we convert to a committee bill. That idea doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. But the minister did assure me that the discussions with the National Gambling Policy Council and the department would result in a piece of legislation being tabled by October this year, which would essentially combine what was included in the 2018 bill with what was passed in 2008, the National Gambling Amendment Act, which was never implemented, with new provisions as a result of the changes in the gambling environment because of online gambling. I'd just like to get some input from the department as to how that legislation is progressing, and when do you expect that it'll be brought to committee for our consideration? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chance. Can I go to the other members?
Chair is Mr. Nkosi, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Nkosi.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you as well to the presenters for the presentations today. Maybe just on my side, I believe that the NLC
sorry for
is making a
intervening.
strong.
Okay.
Sure.
Honorable Member, can I just request that you change the photo that is on here, because it's having a logo of the organization, please?
No problem. Do I
Thank you.
need to do that now? Can I just do it after my submission?
You can just turn it down so that it doesn't appear.
Edit profile picture. Just give me a moment. Better?
It's fine, thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Saying the NLC is attempting to position itself as a reformed institution that's focusing on restoring governance and integrity and public trust after the many years of the corruption scandals that obviously have damaged its credibility over the years. But what's particularly concerning for me is that it's introduced targets around publishing grant payments, implementing anti-bribery management systems, and monitoring funded projects and improving grant turnaround times. However, many of the performance indicators remain process-focused rather than outcome-focused. The institution has targets of reaching 30,000 people through awareness campaigns, 100% publications of grant payments, 100 monitoring of eligible projects, and 3,500 jobs created. To note that these targets have significantly declined from 6,500. But Chairperson, while we welcome what they've stated as a commitment to restoring integrity and credibility, this credibility is not restored through policy statements. It's restored through measurable outcomes. The institution has moved from talking about governance reforms to publishing grant payment systems and implementing anti-bribery systems. Now, our concern is whether these are indicators of real reform or indicators of administrative activity. How should we ensure, or how can we measure whether the culture of the institution has actually genuinely changed? The Commission reports that they will monitor 100% of eligibility funds projects. Monitoring is important, but monitoring alone does not create impact. What percentage of these projects remain operational after 3 years of receiving funding, for example? What percentage generate sustainable jobs, and what percentage become financially independent rather than depending on future grant support? I think that's one of the things that I'm failing to hear in how they respond around their turnaround strategy. And then to the National Gambling Board, they've presented a different challenge. So unlike the National Lottery, the biggest risk is not their historical corruption, but the regulatory relevance and enforcement capacity. Now, Chairperson, the gambling industry is changing faster than the regulatory framework, and they've correctly identified mobile gambling, online gambling, and technology-driven betting as major challenges. But the question before us is whether the regulator keeps or is keeping pace with the industry it's meant to regulate. If the industry evolves faster than regulation, then regulation becomes reactive rather than preventative. How confident is the NGB that the current strategy possesses the technological capacity to regulate the modern gambling environment? So basically, they acknowledge that they remain a level 8 triple BEE entity, but they've got challenges in the procurement system from Black-owned suppliers. So we just need to get more information in terms of making sure that it's not about them presenting what are potential solutions, but actually show us that they've got the know-how in terms of implementing regulation, in terms of making the turnaround and sticking to what is presented to us here on paper. I'd like to hear from them on those issues. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Trinche.
Okay, Mr. Three.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, first, my apologies for coming in a little late. I had another portfolio committee meeting that fortunately has concluded a bit early. Chair, I think my first question is to the National Gambling Board. South Africans have wagered an amount of some 1.5 trillion rand in betting turnover. And the amount lost by households is estimated to be some 75 billion rand. It is also, in terms of the reports, that some 60 to 70% of industry revenue is now generated through your online sports betting sites, Hollywood Bets, Betway, and Lotto, and so on, Lotto Star. The impact of gambling on the vast majority of these who indulge in gambling is concerning, because the net gambling losses consume almost a quarter of all national social grant spending. And so those who receive their social grants, in particular, we are seeing an increase in the number of South Africans who are using their social grants to feed their gambling habit. And obviously, there's that social, not just economic impact, but also social impact on households and families and children in particular. It has also been estimated in a report by 80/20 that the average low-income gambler spends over 40% of their monthly salary on betting in attempting to supplement diminishing budgets. And that some 50 billion rand leaves the local economy annually due to unregulated offshore gambling betting sites. Now, in the light of this, how are all of these particular challenges being addressed in terms of regulation? Because it seems as if we are losing control of, in particular, of the unregulated sector, and that has a negative economic and social impact on South Africans. And if we do not and are unable to put the brakes on this, then South Africans are going to be heading in the direction of your Australians, who have the highest incidence of gambling addiction in the world. So, Chair, that's my first question. The second question then is to the National Lotteries Commission. And this question has to do with the investments of some 9.59 billion that was invested in financial institutions. And what is the status on, if any, whether maybe this is a question that should have been posed to the SIU, because I know that the SIU were involved in this investigation. And there was at some stage also an allegation that there seems to have been some reluctance from the National Lotteries Commission to actually hand over documents. But the NLC has apparently indicated that there's no records to prove that over 9.59 billion was invested in financial institutions over the 4-year period from 2014 to 2017. So I'd like to hear from the National Lotteries Commission their view on those alleged investments to financial institutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other?
Dr.
Yes.
Kigaba, Chair? Dr. Kigaba?
Honorable Kigaba?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks both to the National Gambling Board and the Lotteries Commission for their presentations. Just a few questions, Chair. To the NGB, you made mention at the beginning of the presentation when you were introducing the contents of the presentation on the need to improve governance in the NGB. But I probably missed it in the presentation because you said one of the interventions to improve the performance of the NGB will be to improve governance. Now, I didn't understand what you mean by that and how you intend doing it. So if you could just clarify it. Secondly, you also referred to, the socioeconomic impact survey. How often do you conduct it? I want to understand whether you conduct it as and when you remember, or there is a regulation as to when should such a survey be conducted. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's every 5 years. And how broad does your sample become? This is not a pedantic question. It is to try and understand the extent of the reach and therefore validity and reliability of the survey, so that we understand from the survey how reliable its outcomes are. But are those outcomes available or accessible electronically? If we go to your website, will we be able to look at these surveys so that we understand just the patterns of behavior among South Africans in terms of gambling, and whether your interventions based on your survey have an impact? Are we getting better, or there is no improvement, or are we getting worse in terms of gambling, in spite of the fact that we do these socioeconomic surveys? Because that would then suggest that the interventions are not, they are not consistent with the outcomes. And so we need to do better, we need to do more. Should it be at the level of the legislation, or should we intervene only through public education, or look at other mechanisms? With regard to the NLC, I also join Honorable Chance in commending the progress since we've been engaging. And like the chairperson, Professor Pityana, we also look forward to the appointment, the announcement of another chairperson, because that brings certainty in terms of governance. Now, the two questions I have, one is, what steps we've been briefed as the committee about the investigations. We receive regular briefings from the NPA about the investigations that are being undertaken with regard to corruption allegations at NLC. Now, there is that part that the police can and must do and are doing through the NPA. But what I want to then understand is, whilst those investigations are ongoing, what steps are being taken by the NLC to exercise more due diligence in respect of funding NPOs and combating corruption, so that is dealt with? My view is that we don't need to wait until the end of the investigations and there are people prosecuted. I think even once the investigations are ongoing. The NLC should be taking steps to ensure that these things never recur. I mean, it's quite frightening if you look at not only the figures that are spoken about, but at just how flippant people were in terms of the malfeasance. The second and final question, Chair, I think both particularly NGP can clarify this. Those who bring minor children and leave them, even if attended, outside gambling centers and sometimes overnight, what should happen to this? What's the view about what should happen to this? Because if you go around various malls where there are casinos and gambling centers, you will find children hanging around outside these facilities. And I'm saying even if they are attended, surely this has to be viewed as negating the fundamental rights of the child in terms of Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. So what really should happen? I don't think anybody should be allowed to take a child. If you can't leave your child with under care at home, I don't think anybody should be allowed to drag their children and leave them hanging around gambling centers overnight. You are already, in legal terms, you are already, oh gosh, I just forgot this term now, but you are inducting this child into gambling. We cannot allow that. I think every child should be protected, and any person who wants to engage in gambling should exercise an informed right without them having been lured into it as a child by being by having this culture inculcated in them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Gigaba. I saw a hand.
No, Chair, is a legacy hand from Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
No, I don't know whether the chair is here, but I would want
Chair
to...
raised his hand, Chair. My apologies.
Okay, no, it's fine. Chair, you may proceed. I give you to close the meeting after everyone has responded, but you can proceed.
Okay. No, I just wanted to check with the department on the recommendation of Parliament. How far are they in implementing the recommendation? Because at the level of the NLC, because we've not had any feedback and there have been some questions from members. So that's the first thing. And secondly, on the NGP, as we have observed previously, and the level of instability that has been there, there's now a new acting CEO. Just to get a sense, when are they closing the gap at the level of the board or the CEO so that there is stability in that particular institutions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I will now, in the absence of any other hands, I would now want to give over to the NGB to respond. Thereafter, it will be the NLC. But I also just need to indicate that I don't have a question right now because most of the questions that I wanted to address has already been addressed by some of the members. I just need to indicate to the chairperson that there is a letter of dispute from one of the organizations, the SERA organization, the South African Roads Association, by Mr. Freddy Nyatela to the committee, but I think that one we will look into it in the next committee that we will be having a meeting. But for now, I would then request responses from the NGB and thereafter the NLC.
Thank you, Chair. I will cover the questions, and then my colleagues will come in where necessary. Maybe let me start with the Honorable Kikaba's questions. Honorable Kikaba, when I referred to the issue of the need to improve governance, it's actually on 4 levels. I think the first level is to make sure that our audit and risk committees are fully capacitated and are functioning, fulfilling that function that they actually have. I actually had the interviews of the final member that was outstanding last week in terms of fulfilling some of those. So that's the first part, the audit and risk committees. But also making sure that there's commitment and on the implementation of the outcomes of the audit, outcomes that we actually see as we do the audit every year. The other aspect is the issue of the policy reviews within the organization that should be reflective of the current developments and making sure that they remain relevant and implemented accordingly within the organization. And the final point is to make sure that in terms of our mandate on the issue of the implementation of the Act, we become more smarter and to make sure that it's implemented as it is actually envisaged. I think that was the level of that we're talking about. That's the first part. The second part, we are referring to the socioeconomic studies that we do check as the NGP from time to time. We do those every 3 years. And the sample that we're talking about, it's a minimum of about 4,000 participants that would normally have. And those are available, I think, on our website in terms of what is the. In fact, some of the revelations that we received there, they had actually gave us the results around the issues of the online gambling itself and the unlicensed operators. Some of the results that we get there, we actually use them to come up with our own strategies. Hence, we're talking about the issue of the expression of interest currently. Hence, we're talking about the engagements we have with Google and Meta and the engagements with the other jurisdictions, as it were. Some of those are the issues that we pick up from some of the surveys that we actually do on our site. In relation to the issue of the children that are hanging around the gambling spaces, well, I think that what the focus has always been, I think, has been more on the compliance from the side of the operators to make sure that the people that they gamble with are actually people who are over 18. I think that is what we have spent more time on it. But the point is that, and we've been raising this point, to say the advertising of gambling should not be at the spaces where children would easily see them. And in this sense, I guess, because you are already in the casino, it means that advertising would obviously be there. Perhaps there may need to be intervention at a certain level to deal with some of these challenges. In fact, Honorable Kikaba, what we are actually saying also is that the advertising by the gambling operators, they've been so daring to the extent that they go and advertise even in public institutions. You'd be sitting in Home Affairs and you would see an advert on gambling. The view of NGP is that we should actually abolish gambling advertising in any of the public institutions, be they public offices, be they the schools, be they whatever centers that we actually have. That should not be allowed. And perhaps I think that that is the issue that we'll be pursuing as the NGP to make sure that we deal with that particular aspect. So there is a concern, and perhaps the advertising norms and standards that we are coming up with will address some of those things. Perhaps there may need to be enhancement of those ones who are hanging around gambling spaces, as it were, because in nature they are gambling spaces, so kids should not be exposed to those. So I think those are the points that I wanted to make on that one. Now, going back to the question that Honorable Chance actually raised, I think that I'm going to leave the first question to the DDIC to talk to. But I'm going to talk to the issue of the trend on the gambling revenue. Some of the points that Honorable Trim raised also relate to some of the background that was given by Honorable Chance. So I may be responding on those two. Now, if you look at the gambling revenue, when we are saying that there is an improvement, but if you look at it, it's on a declining trend. It's based on the analysis of the 3 years that we're actually in question. And what we have realized this year is that those ones who are doing most of the sports betting, as it were, you will find that Western Cape and Mpumalanga have actually declined in terms of that. So they have increased, but they were increasing on a declining in a declining manner. That is what we have actually seen. But also we've seen that there's been negative growth in some of the provinces, like Gauteng, in some of these particular instances. Now, what is the point there? The point is that we have been quite active in relation to education and awareness programs. We have been partnering with various partners, including the provincial licensing authorities themselves, in terms of driving the public awareness and the public education messaging. That is what we have actually been doing on our side. So there is increased awareness. But also we have been dealing on the level of the unlicensed operators in terms of making sure that we close some of them. So there's been messaging across to make sure that people understand what gambling is, what it does, what are the risks involved, and all of those things. We actually worked also with the Gambling Foundation, a Responsible Gambling Foundation, as it were, in driving some of those particular messages. So we would think that there is an impact from that particular level, looking at the coverage that we have actually had. So I think that would be contributing to some of those particular aspects. Then the other one was around the report on the NGPC, I think the one on the advertising guidelines, but also the issue of Section 11. I think, Honorable Chance, those two reports, I think now are reports that will be considered by the NGPC, and we will be guided from that process in terms of going forward. Perhaps as part of that, then we would be asked to give them also to the committee, but they have not been considered yet, but they've been submitted to them, because we are waiting for the next NGPC meeting to actually take place. In relation to I think the issue of the EOI, expression of interest, on that specific issue, we do envisage that is going to be out anytime now in the next 4 weeks or so. We'll be taking out that one, and we are looking at a wider scope. Whoever that is going to make submissions of that, they'll certainly be considered. I must say that we have, before we actually even got to this stage, we have had a few who were making proposals in terms of what they think, that have approached our office, saying that they have something. So we decided that we're not going to entertain them. We must rather go out on an expression of interest, so that we can frame the requirements that we actually have and see if there's a case for us to go out on a proper request for proposals that we can be able to use going forward. So international entities and all of them, I'm sure that they will be able to make a contribution in terms of what they have and how it can actually be assisting. And then the issue around the foundation, or whether it is actually succeeding. Look, we have been working with the foundation. We have an MOU with the foundation. We've been working together in most of the programs. They do a lot, I think, in terms of the call center, in terms of making sure that there's proper counseling for those ones that find themselves as problem gamblers, so to speak. The questions, I think, that may be questions whether, for example, the 0.1% that they actually getting is actually adequate, and whether also the way they are actually positioned is actually the correct position, because part of the work that they are doing on education and awareness is part of the work that NGB is actually doing. And perhaps the question would be, how do we then make sure that those two actually work more closely structurally than it actually is at a certain point. But we do know that they also get a lot of assistance from the operators, as it were, if the case, in this case. So I think that there is progress that they're actually making. We are working with them. They have that call center, which helps a lot. And I think that there can be discussions about its structure and location, but also in terms of the bigger impact that they could be making going forward. The concern they had raised with us is that there is one or two other operators that are not contributing that 0.1%. And it's a concern to us. So perhaps what we would look at is to make that contribution to actually be mandatory and strengthen that particular area. That may be one of the considerations that may need to be looked at. In terms of the revenue from the LPMs and the projected deficits, I'll let the CFO speak on that one. But let me just go to the tax issue. The tax issue, remember there's a proposal from the National Treasury in relation to the 20% tax on those illegal operators, offshore operators that may be in our space. I think that is one of the considerations that have been put there. As the NGB, we had done extensive work on this issue in terms of our own research. And in our own research, what we do realize is that there is some of the countries are actually having taxation of around 6-10%. It would go to the median of about 18-20%. That would actually find the extremes would be sitting at about 45%. Now, in a sense, then the National Treasury, I'm sure that would have done also part of their own research to say what is it that can be the correct percentage for South Africa. But I know that there's an engagement between National Treasury and the DTIC, and we are engaging with the National Treasury through the DTIC on some of these particular aspects. So I wouldn't like to expand much on it, the issue of the taxation, as it were. Suffice that the provinces are the ones who are getting the taxation because they are already charging, I think, 6% of taxation that is going to the provinces, and the other related aspects that actually they have made their own input through the DTIC, and also they've made their input, I think, to the National Treasury, and I think there's engagement on some of those things. So I wouldn't want to go further than that particular point. Honorable Nkosi raised the issue around keeping the pace with the industry. Of course, Honorable Nkosi, we have raised that particular matter to say the National Gambling Act of 2004, obviously the conditions at that particular point in time did not include the current challenges we're facing of the advancements of technology and all of the other things that are basically there. And I think that there is an understanding of that, I think, from even the department's perspective, that we do need to come up with a new policy in relation to interactive gambling, because currently the Act prohibits interactive gambling. So it means that there shouldn't be online casinos that we should be seeing and all of those kinds of things. And I think that that's the engagement that we'll be having at the NGPC. But I would say that we're working with the department on this one in order to make sure that that online gambling policy does come up, and we are part of that particular engagement as it is at this particular point in time. In relation to Honorable Trin, you were saying how are we addressing the aspects of the social grants being spent on gambling and the social impact of it on the household as well, and that 40% of the monthly salary that is being spent on betting, and the issue of the unregulated market, that 50% that we're putting there. The unregulated market, Honorable Trin, I think I mentioned about a few aspects. Number one, we mentioned the fact that we're closing the issue of the illegal or unlicensed operators who are operating online or who are operating on the internet. So as we find them, as we get complaints, we close them. We are also now committing to having some surveillance that we should be doing around the issue of what is actually illegal in the market in relation to online gambling. And those things we are working on as it is at this particular point in time. So the online, the verified operators portal that we came up with is actually to deal with the issue of unregulated offshore operators. Because what we're saying is that we should actually make sure that those who choose to gamble, they gamble with the licensed operators. Hence, we provide them in one portal so that they can be able to check with that. Number two, we are dealing with it through the issue of the unlawful winnings that you actually find. In the event that you actually win in that particular space, that money is not going to go to you. Of course, working together with the banks and the other stakeholders, that money is going to come to the National Gambling Board, and it's going to be confiscated by them and go back to the state. We recently have taken back, I think, an amount of about 3 million, which part of it is coming from that unregulated offshore space that you're actually talking about. There are more aggressive stances that have been taken, I think recently being Brazil, where Brazil have actually said that we also take your assets, we confiscate them if you are gambling illegally. So this part is one aspect that is a concern that we're making the effort to deal with them. So when we engage with the countries where or jurisdictions where these unlicensed operators come from, part of what we ask them to do is to make sure that they find or they make sure that their own licenses comply to their own laws and not go to the spaces where they are not allowed to go to. That has been the discussion we have had with them. We have written those particular letters. And by the way, Honorable Chance, we received some of the responses. We had physical meetings, for example, with Curaçao. We had physical meetings with UK on the same matter, and they responded to our email. The issue is that they require us to go through certain steps. In the first instance, we must notify the operator that you are not supposed to be monitored, to be operating in this space because you're not licensed, so close down. Number two, we must give them the cease and desist notice so that they can know that they are not supposed to be operating. And then if they still insist, then we go and notify their jurisdictions so that they can take the necessary steps on those ones. It's work in progress. We're going to continue to work with them. They do respond, they do engage us when we meet in those international forums, and we think that we're going to have more engagements with them in dealing with some of those issues. So the issues around the social grants, the use of social grants, it is a concern for us. We have picked it up in our own studies in this particular case. The most aggressive, or some of the aggressive company of the countries, they go to the extent of saying, for as long as you are getting a social security, you cannot use that money to gamble. Perhaps one of the stances that we should be looking at adopting is the one that says that if you are on the social security or you are getting an allowance from NSFAS, you should not be using those to gamble. In fact, the private sector is more willing to help us do that. But as it is now, we have no legal standing to actually be doing that process. Perhaps it's something that we need to consider as a country going forward. It's an issue that we are all concerned about. I think that I think we've covered some of the aspects. I think that the issues about the legislation, I'm sure that the DTIC will cover that, and the issue around the issue of the recovery of the former accounting authority, I think they'll deal with that aspect as well. I would have wanted the CFO to deal with the issue of the revenue because we decided, Honorable Chance, that we must have our own assessment of our revenue so that we can be able to look at the sustainability of the organization going forward and what kind of measures we can come up with. And that is the basis of that study that was done internally, the sustainability study that we did. I think that is going to respond to that, the CFO. And if there's anything I left, I think that Yvonne can also come in on some of these questions. I hope that I've covered. Maybe CFO also cover the issue of the triple BE that Honorable Ngosi raised.
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the revenue, when do we anticipate the deficit to realize? Based on our initial projections, it was going to realize as early as the 2027-28 financial year. However, we put in measures to ensure this does not occur. So we put in cost saving and cost cutting measures. We managed to then revise our projections. By the 2031-32 financial year, we anticipate a deficit of in the region of 6.5 million rand, which then grows over the period to about 22 million rand in the 2035-36 financial year. So this is the portion that we've realized that we need additional revenue generating measures to be put in place, hence the proposal in terms of extension of NSAMs to other modes of gambling, the advertising tax, as well as the National Treasury 20% taxation as well. In terms of the taxation bill that Treasury has proposed, the 20%, and I think just in terms of NGB's views on that, the 20% Treasury indicated was premised on all of the illegal operators on an online platform. So the tax should be as high as possible because it's a penalty that's basically being imposed to illegal operators who have not entered the space of compliance, so they would not be paying the PLAs, the 6% that the CEO has alluded to. They wouldn't have incurred any of the compliance requirements to enter into the legalized space. So the 20% should ideally be as high as possible. And where NGB comes in from a collaborative approach, this is where our blocking system comes in to say that we will be in a position to identify who all of these illegal people are. We can then hand over the information to SARS or to Treasury, and they will then be in a position to impose this tax because they then have the mandate to do such. When they impose this penalty or this tax, the revenue goes to the National Revenue Fund. So just on the issue of how does NGB then benefit, or how does this alleviate any of the financial constraints NGB faces, we will then have to put forward a motivation to Treasury, and we will then be in a position to request additional funding based on the cost of this blocking system that we put in place. So it'll basically be the enforcement costs that we then incur. We will be able to put through a proposal, and they will then provide us with revenue from a grant perspective. So our grant revenue can increase based on the motivation that we provide. So we will not be a direct beneficiary of the 20% tax or whatever the percentage ends up being. We won't be a beneficiary to the percentage of the tax there. I think on the last question of the member on the issue around triple BEE, so NGB has put in place mechanisms to ensure that there is transformation from the service providers that we procure goods and services from. And we have had targets in the past, in the previous financial year, set against the 70% and the 60% procurement of goods and services from Black-owned entities, and we've been in a position to comply and meet those targets. So I think we do have mechanisms in place from a procurement perspective where we specifically target Black-owned entities in terms of the legislative requirements that are in place. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Chair. I think the one question that I forgot was the issue of the 10 illegal gambling sites that you said that would actually put down. I think that one is the first, that indicator, it's a new indicator that you're actually putting in, but also it's based on the fact that once we have that expression of interest done, and we can be able to determine what kind of a system do we have in place, this should be easier to deal with in this instance. So these ones are the ones that we receive complaints about, and as we do our own assessment and surveillance of these ones, then the figure is going to be improving. Currently, we're busy building that kind of capacity, as it were. So I think let me leave it there. I don't know if Yvonne wants to add anything on the questions that have been asked.
Chair, I'm covered. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair. I think that will leave it there then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the responses. Can I now give over to the NLC to give responses?
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I'm supported by a team of very competent colleagues, and I'm going to just ask them to come in on various matters. And then I'm sure that my chair may just want to come in with some concluding remarks. Molemo, can I hand over to you to talk about anti-bribery? Tina will do the finances. Mzwa, can you take the smaller projects, Maripiane, the due diligence? And then there's a question for Lesedi. Chair, through you, if I could ask those colleagues to come in, and then there's some areas that I will then talk to at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fine. You may proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner, and then good morning, honorable members. Thank you so much. So the first question that was posed is on the implementation of anti-bribery management system 37001, and then how does it actually assist in the managing the ethics of the organization for us to can see whether it is working or not. So first and foremost, we'll understand that the ISO 37001 is a standard that is actually assisting with the implementation of controls in the prevention, detection of bribery and corruption within the organization. And once you get certified in that area, you are sending a strong message to the public that your controls are working from the preventative measures, and then also when issues are identified, actually being responded to, either through investigations and disciplinary and so forth. So how do we see that the ethics is actually yielding the results? So we've got the Social and Ethics Committee of the board, which is responsible for driving the ethics management, ethics agenda, including the ESG strategy. Now, this board committee is also being evaluated externally to see whether it complies with the governance processes. So the results for that will actually be an indicator of the ethics within the organization from the governance perspective. We do conduct the ethics survey, which is completed by all employees and validated against various reports. And then the outcome of that also indicate whether we're an ethical organization or not. For this current financial year, we are planning to have a ethics maturity assessment that will also give us an indicator that the governance of ethics is actually working within the organization. And then all these measures that I've been talking to are internal, which begs the question as to what about the ethics by the grantees and the illegal lotteries and so forth. So we do have the monitoring and evaluation function within the organization, which goes out and check if the grant agreements have been complied with and the money is being spent according to the grant agreements and for the right purpose. And the results for that indicates whether our grantees are being ethical in the utilization of funds or not. So the trends and the stats that we receive, if there's a decline, it means we are getting somewhere. But if there's an increase, it means that there is a break or a breach somewhere. Therefore, we need to develop corrective actions. When it comes to the issues of illegal lotteries, we do have the regulatory compliance specialists that go out and inspect the lotteries and sports pools. The results likewise are also analyzed, and then they also be presented. So those are the external stakeholders that actually, impacting on the ethics of the organization, because ethics is not only internal, but also external. And then when we go to the issue that is actually raised by Honorable Dr. Gigaba, that we shouldn't be waiting for SIU to complete investigations. I can confirm that we are not waiting. And then the case in point is that all the recommendations that were issued by the SIU have been implemented. That speak about the implementation of the grant management system to make sure that we can prevent unauthorized and miscreant in the grant management space. That has been implemented with the API partners, and we are picking up and preventing the frauds and corruption that have potential of materializing, and there are reports with regard to that. They also recommended the lifestyle audits. We can confirm that the lifestyle audits were conducted for all the board members, EXCO members, and the staff members, and we continue to implement those even for the new employees that have been appointed. A proactive funding project committee has been established which is to manage the issues that have been identified in the past, to say that there was a abuse of a proactive funding. So the committee actually looks into that and is accountable to the commissioner as well. And the separation of functions or duties between the employees and the distribution agencies was also a recommendation that has been implemented through the SOP and the policy of grant funding. And then that was also being audited and monitored. And over and above that, we have reviewed our security policy, and then we are rolling out the security vetting for all employees. And then we're starting with the EXCO members. I think that's another area of improvement. And then to show further that we are not waiting for all the applications that we received, and then there is non-compliance with the grant agreement, either through non-submission of the progress report or unsupported financial expenditure by the grantees. We do have a committee that is called the Non-Compliant Grantee Committee, which looks at the submissions from the provincial offices per district, and then they present those to the committee, excuse me, for corrective action. Now, the corrective action that has been taken there is that if you found to be non-compliant with the grantee agreement or misuse the funds, then you are put on the non-compliant grantee register, which is the list that prohibits you from applying for further funding up until you correct the non-compliance, or you return the money, and the period of 1 year lapses as a window period. So those are some of the initiatives that we've put in place to make sure that we do not wait for the SIU. But further to that, we are reporting also to the South African Police Services as required by PRECA, and we open cases. And then we do report also the non-compliant grantees again to the registration bodies, being your DSD and CIPC. And also if the internal employees have been involved, we're also reporting them to their professional bodies. Thank you so much.
Tina, thank you very much. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. Honorable Chance, in terms of your question relating to the revenue projections and why there's been a jump in the numbers, this is based on the projections from Sizakaya that we received as part of the bid documentation. And what we did in the current financial year is apply a medium road scenario to the projections. And this is primarily based on the fact that it's their first year of operation. There's a transition period, and we really didn't want to use a high road scenario when we didn't have enough evidence that these numbers could be achieved. And that's why you'll see a jump in year 2 and 3, because we did take into account the high road scenario in year 2 and 3, given that, we would give 1 year just for moving to the new operator and stabilizing. So that's the reason for the jump in the numbers. And then, Honorable Thring, in terms of your question relating to the investments, I think, this matter was discussed in the SIU and the SAPS presentation. And I think what we can confirm that there's been absolutely no resistance from the NLC to submit any documents to the SIU. Any document that we had on record relating to the investments has been submitted to the SIU. I think the SIU did confirm that the only document that they've been looking for that they cannot find is the approval from National Treasury for the NLC to invest in the various financial institutions as required by the Lotteries Act. And that particular approval document is nowhere in the records that were given to us or were left behind by the previous leadership. So these investments were made by the previous leadership in the organization, and the decisions were made at a very senior level. So none of the employees were currently in the employ of the NLC that were here at that point in time have record of those decisions. The SIU have confirmed that they will try and check with National Treasury if the documents are available. And further to that, I think we're also going to ask them to maybe explore the AGSA and their records, because these investments were audited by the AGSA at that point in time, and there were no findings because the NLC received clean audits. So that's where we stand on the investments. We have submitted every file that we do have on the investments to the SIU. It's just this particular document. Thanks.
Thank you. Lesedi, can I ask you to come in on the legal questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Scholz, Chairperson. Honorable One, good morning to you and good morning to the honorable members of this portfolio committee and to my chairperson of the board and the members. I'm going to address questions posited by Honorable Chance. I'll first start with the one which is inquiring about the capacity within the Legal Services Division of the NLC. In terms of the old structure, Honorable Member, the legal services was supposed to be capacitated by 8 personnel. And when we assumed office in 2024 March, those positions were all filled, which ranged from myself as the executive manager legal, and the specialist that was supposed to be there, the officers, as well as the interns. But in the course of time, especially in the better part of this year, we experienced some attrition within my division, where I received resignations of our 2 interns after they received permanent employment elsewhere, as well as one of the officers having to resign. And therefore, that left us with only 5 warm bodies within the division. And the 5, Chair, in attendance to a part of your question, I wish to confirm that starting with myself in terms of admissions, I am admitted as an advocate of the High Court since October 2004. And my acting manager is also an admitted attorney since February of 2019. My officer is a qualified legal person, having qualified with LLB since December of 2022. And my existing intern is to be admitted this year, July 2026, after serving articles for 2 years. So we have a capable, competent, and qualified personnel within the Legal Services Division with a plethora of experience. And in terms of the approved new structure, the structure is to increase from 8 to 12, and the recruitment process is underway to fill in the vacancies that emanated as a result of the attrition that I related to. The second question now traverses to the issue of the legal practitioners. We have just concluded a procurement process related to the panel of the legal practitioners or practices within the NLC. We are still finalizing the legal and governance processes that must be put in place before those legal practices are allocated matters and start to render legal services. And the strategy we have adopted is that we have a rotation strategy which we are going to use to allocate instructions to those legal firms. And we are fortunate that we have a structured legal fees that we have imposed on them, as opposed to them dictating the legal fees that they will be charging us. So that was part of the terms of reference that were advertised for the bid. Lastly, it's a question related to the legislative reform. I think it's prudent for one to advise this committee that the reform is underway. The NLC has expressed its interest to amend its legislation, which was last amended in 2013, together with its ancillary regulations. The NLC has consulted and engaged extensively internally, and the NLC has submitted memorandum of objects and policy documents to the DTIC, suggesting various amendments, which obviously are catering for all the deficiencies that we have identified since the last amendment. And those memo of objects and policy documents received the sanction of the board, which also was a part of the engagements that we undertook. And as we speak, the DTIC is currently seized with the process of legislative drafting in order to finalize the suggestions for the amendments made by the NLC. And the other part related to legislative reform, where Honorable Chance asked if it is possible to have a single legislating regulating NLC and NGB. That on its own, Honorable said, touches on the constitutional prescripts. And in particular here, we're talking, and I'll make reference to Schedule 4, Part A of the Constitution, which is to be read with sections 43 and 44 of the Constitution. And that particular schedule, Honorable Chance, talks about functional areas of concurrent national and provincial legislative competences. Therefore, it should be, and it is, the judicial prerogative of Parliament to amend the Constitution to accommodate the suggested proposition. Why I am saying that? It's because the very same schedule that I've just cited of the Constitution provides that casinos, racing, gambling, and others, excluding lotteries and sports pools, are matters of concurrent national and provincial legislative competence. So what this means is that both Parliament and provincial legislatures may enact legislation regulating gambling activities that I've just cited, amongst them casinos, betting, wagering, horse racing, bookmaking activities. However, it should be also noted that the Constitution itself expressly excludes lotteries and sports pools from this concurrent competence. That is why we are having a separate legislation known as the Lotteries Act 57 of 1997 as amended. But because lotteries and sports pools, Honorable Chance, are expressly excluded from Schedule 4, obviously, they do not fall within the provincial legislative competence, and consequently, these matters become exclusive, preserve of the national sphere of government, as I have cited sections 43 and 44, which governs that process. Therefore, accordingly, Parliament has exclusive authority to legislate on lotteries and sports pools, as well as any matters related to gambling. So, Chair, those are the questions that relate to legal services as posited by Honorable Chance. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me then, in the absence of any other responses, I will now give over to the chairperson of the NLC.
Honourable Chair, if I may.
Okay, you may.
Thank you very much. I think there was just one more question that I would like Ms. Wandile to handle, and then I would like to just, through you, Chair, just respond on one or two others.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Mzwa?
Good day, Chair and members and colleagues. Thank you, Jody. Honorable Chance, you had a question that we had posed on relating to the Maria Pane Old Age Center. I must state that the application had come through to the NLC on the 9th of September 2025. The organization that had applied for funding had been formed and issued with the DSD certificate on the 31st of January 2025. And they had put through an application of about 18,815,000 rand, which is about 18.8 million rand. Honorable Chance, I'm giving those dates because they are very critical, because the organization had applied for a large grant. And on inquiry from the concerned provincial office, which in this case is in Mpumalanga, it was then determined that the organization did not meet the minimum minimum requirements for a large grant application, in that they did not have the audited financial statement,
They did not have the welfare certificate, which is issued by the Department of Social Development. They did not have a residential care facility, again issued by the Department of Social Development, and the health certificate, which will then confirm and authorize this organization to accommodate the elder persons. And as a result, Honorable Chance, the organization had failed to meet the minimum requirements. The office had communicated with them to request them to provide such information before the application goes up to the for adjudication to the distributing agencies. And because they had failed to provide such, then based on the requirements as per regulations, the application had been declined. But it is an application or a project that is high on the agenda of the Commission in terms of ensuring that particular project is completed and handed over to the community. And that conversation would have started with the relevant stakeholders, including the Department of Social Development, to ensure that the organization that eventually takes over that facility is fully registered and fully authorized to care for the aged by the social development, by the relevant government departments. So those conversations, which is led by the provincial leadership in the province of the NLC, are ongoing, and it's a program that the NLC intends to conclude. There would have been another question, Chair, that relates to, I think Honorable Dr. Kigaba would have raised a question on the due diligence on funding of the NPOs. Chair, you'll recognize that with the old way of doing things, I'll give a very simple example. The NLC at the time could not pick up that one person had applied for multiple applications for funding. We then realized all these weaknesses and put up together, and we developed a new grant management system. We then engaged further with our partners, which is the Social Development, CIPC, SARS, when it comes to the verification and issues of compliance, because the old operation that got us into where we at in terms of monies, public funds being misused, is that you had organizations that were NPOs that were being hijacked. We couldn't confirm who were the directors of those organizations. Projects were being placed in communities where there was no community assessment that would have been done to say this particular project is required. Issues of adjudication and the process of adjudication had been created as a parallel process. We have then done away with such things, where, like I've said, we have got the partnerships with DSD, CICP, and SARS, just to confirm whether those organizations, NPOs and NPCs do exist, and the people that have submitted the application to the National Lotteries Commission are the very same people registered on the databases of those institutions. We conduct pre-adjudication site visit to confirm that the program itself that has been applied for does exist on the ground. As you'll recall, members, that you would have had projects that would have been applied for and funding being granted, yet there was nothing on the ground. The communities did not know of such projects. So we have introduced that as a pre-adjudication assessment site visit on all projects that come through to our platform. And we have also further, in terms of ensuring that the monies are getting deposited to the right bank account that are in the name of those organizations. We've got also partnerships with the banks to ensure that the bank confirmations are also done. We also have partnership with the South African Fraud Prevention Organization that speaks to if a person has been reported to have been a delinquent, sorry to use that word, had committed some fraud. We are able to pick it up from that partnership that we have
And we are able then to say we can't continue this particular process because you have been listed in that database. So all these controls have been done to ensure, Honorable Dr. Kigaba, that the past does not repeat itself. And these have seen significant improvement in terms of the verification and compliance, and also strengthen our control environment and decrease the risk that NLC had been exposed to. Thanks, Chair. That's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you, Mzwa. Thank you, Chair and honourable members. Just to respond to Honourable Chance, you asked a question about strategic priorities and sports not being included. These are cross-cutting themes that run across the core funding areas. So sports gets 28% of the total of the pool that goes into the NLDTF. Charities gets 47%, and arts, I think, gets around 23%, and then the 2% for miscellaneous. So there is a huge chunk of money that goes to sports. The board then identified a number of cross-cutting areas to say, when you're looking at sports, how does that resonate in rural areas? Are there mechanisms in sports that we can use to creatively and innovatively combat GBV? So those themes are cross-cutting across arts, charities, sports, and the miscellaneous. Then certainly we can make the details of the reparations infrastructure projects available on the understanding that this is a rolling list. As the SIU comes up with more projects, obviously they'd be added, but we know about, I think there's either 22 or 23 projects, infrastructure projects, and we can make that list available. And then I need to owe you an apology, Honourable Chance. My board chair has indicated we'll give you the report from the reparations committee. There were just some papier considerations that I needed to take into account, and we'll get that to you by Friday this week. In terms of the legal costs, we'll make these available as soon as our audit is concluded, as all of the figures are currently being audited by the AG. Then, Honourable Nkosi, I agree with you 100% in terms of credibility being restored through action. In terms of our indicators, there are a number of constraining factors. 8 of our APP targets are directly derived from our Act. 6 come from the Auditor General. So if we do not have these indicators, the Auditor General indicates to us it's non-compliance with our Act. And that's because if it's year on year, it then becomes a significant finding, and that then has dire consequences for us as an entity. So 8 of our targets are directly derived from the Act and the regulations, and then 6 from the Auditor General, with some overlap in between. The concern that you've raised about sustainability after 3 years and NPOs, NPCs becoming more independent, absolutely agree with you there. And this is a matter that we are currently seized with. And I think the chair was alluding to this. Have we made progress? Absolutely. Are there areas of growth and continuous improvement? Undoubtedly. And so what we've undertaken this year is to start looking at some models that would help NPOs, NPCs to become social enterprises. And so some of the organizations that we've looked at, for instance, if you look at ECDs in rural areas, they have food gardens and they have a chicken coop, whereas ECDs perhaps in a township would have a jumping castle and can then be a party venue to look at different revenue streams. And this requires a fundamental shift in how we've thought about funding, because we've just funded and then there's a 12-month cooling off period, which exacerbates financial pressures on NPOs and NPCs. So looking at multi-year funding, and then the cooling off period as well is a big constraining factor. One of the ways in which we're also trying to address that is through capacity building. We're also constantly re-looking at the model for capacity building to make sure that it's tangible and it's real. And so there are discussions internally about how we can also make sure that we provide NPOs, NPCs with tangible skills in terms of financial management, in identifying different revenue streams. What can be monetized in terms of some of the services? For instance, in the Northwest, there is a community clinic. And what they do is they then sell their services to the local businesses. So every Wednesday, they go out to the local car dealerships for blood pressure monitoring and cholesterol screening. So they've looked at ways in terms of how they can monetize some of the services. And so that's certainly the intention for the Lotteries Commission going forward. Our monitoring as well is designed to extract impact. And so that also forms part of the work. When we go out, we also use that information to see how we could better assist and better our capacity building interventions. I think the last point, Honourable Chair, I think you made about Mr. Nyatela. We certainly welcome a dialogue with the Portfolio Committee around this. Mr. Nyatela has raised a number of very serious concerns. We've looked at those internally, and he has, in fact, asked for 15.7 million, and he's been allocated 9.7 million. Our regulations are quite clear that the basis for an appeal cannot be on the amount. It can be on the other factors if they've been declined. But Mr. Nyatela has not been declined. In fact, he's been allocated a significant portion of what he had asked for. Chair, let me stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm not sure if Prof. Pichana would like to come in. That concludes our response. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. Thank you to the colleagues, and very special appreciation to the honourable members for the questions that have been raised and the discussions that have ensued. I do think that as the NLC, we should take a further look at the questions and to see if we can provide the committee with probably a comprehensive responses than the viva voce process that we have undertaken. And I shall have a word with the commissioner about that. Probably that's what we should do. My second point, Chair, is to appreciate Mr. Chance's raising a very tantalizing possibility of a consolidated fund for good causes between the National Gambling Board and the National Lottery. There is no provision for that at the moment. But if it were to happen as a fund with contributions from the gambling community and from the National Lottery, that would be a very, very interesting idea that I am sure Parliament can have a look at with due regard to the issues that Advocate Boyhang has mentioned. So really, I think that is a very, very interesting possibility, and I wish that it should be possibly be looked at towards implementation. The second thing I wanted to say about reparations, Mr. Chance, one, let me just say that I just received your letter yesterday, and the matter I shall respond to you as soon as I can. Let me also say that as the Commissioner has mentioned, a comprehensive report on reparations is on its way to the Minister as we speak. And that is a report to the Minister which we will request that it be made available to Parliament and to you through the committee, as indeed the Minister would in any event would wish to do. And all the issues and the questions that you have really been discussed in that report on reparations. And I don't really need to say any more, I think, to that. Mr. Chance, I think it is, has also raised issues about the distribution agency that we have. And our view is that the distributing agency is really beginning to pick up in its work. We've had comprehensive conversations with them and workshops with them about distributing, and we can see progress already underway in the way in which they function. As the reporters mentioned, the comprehensive speed with which they are able to do the adjudication, which is very much appreciated. And in the report that we'll get, the funds allocated, etc., will also appear in the report that we have just received, that Mr. Chance, I think, has also asked questions about. Former employees, I think that's something that we have not responded to, that clearly you'll get a report whether former employees have become whistleblowers and what has happened. To honorable member Nkosi, I just wish to say that yes, sustainability is a very important marker of progress, but it is a very difficult to sustain sustainability, if I may put it like that. In the kind of constituency that we're dealing with, because we're dealing with a constituency that really is dependent on whether the socio-economic quality of what they work with. Many projects that we deal with have come back to us about the sustainability question mark that is raised all the time in our assessment of projects. So yes, that is an issue, but it is not an easy question with the community that we deal with, and we need to deal with it with a degree of sensitivity. The final issue I wish to raise, which I think was raised as well, I am convinced that on the issues of concern, there's been a lot of progress. The culture change in the organization is work in progress. It's not completely satisfactory. And indeed, there are elements of bringing people along as we seek to change. There's been, for example, a major organizational change in the organization that has been through. It has lots of implications of fears or concerns that organized labor tends to raise, and they certainly do in this case. So somehow, as we look at the culture change, the ethics of the organization, and we look at how the structure of the organization can serve the purposes for which we set, we are always conscious of the impact in the confidence and settlement of the staff in particular, and how these matters are received. We do this with all the sensitivities that I think they deserve. And my last word is to say thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. And I wish to particularly appreciate the work of the Commissioner and the executive team of the National Lotteries Commission. Allow me also to include my colleagues, members of the board, for the expertise that they put into this to drive governance and accountability within the organization. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson of the committee, I am now giving you back your meeting. Thank you for trusting me to share this meeting for you. You will give to members that want to follow up on the questions, and then we will close the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, Ms. Matumela from DTIC would like to respond to some questions, I would assume, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, Andre. She can
Yes,
respond.
yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good afternoon to the Honorable Chairperson and the Honorable members. My name is Nondombi Matomela from the DTIC. There were some questions, Chair, that were posed to the department. First one being the forensic investigation that was conducted at the National Gambling Board. Chair, what I would like to say with regards to that one is that, yes, there was an investigation that was conducted. The department is currently implementing recommendations from that investigation. However, Chairperson, the matter remains sub judice, and as such, we are unable to comment further on it at the moment. We will, time permitting, Chair, come back and appraise the committee on that matter. And then, Chairperson, the other issue that was raised was in relation to the appointment of the board of the NGB. And I just wanted to again appraise the committee that we are busy with that process, and it is receiving priority attention, and we should be finalizing it soon. We do recognize, Chairperson, that we have taken some time in completing this process, but we are working on it, and it should be finalized soon. And then, Chair, in terms of the question around the legislation and the private members' bill that was raised by Honorable Chance, we request to come back on this one, Chair. I unfortunately do not have the current status at hand, so we will respond to the committee in writing. And then, Chair, lastly, there was a question raised around the process of appointing Professor Pikiana's successor as the chair of the NLC board. Chairperson, on that one, I want to just appraise the committee and indicate that we are on the last leg of that process, Chair. We are currently going through the cabinet processes, and once all of that is concluded, there will be an announcement, and I can indicate again that this should be happening sooner rather than later, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chance's hand is raised, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Chance.
Thank you very much. I just want to pick up on a couple of points resulting from the responses. The first is the comment on the NGB executives. I think venture to say that they need to have a reread of the Treasury's paper on the 20% tax, because it's not a tax on the illegal operators, it's a tax on all online gambling. The presumption being that at some point those operators will be licensed and regulated. So I think that's just one point I need to make. Secondly, I'd like to just follow up with the Commissioner on the issue of the budget. I think roughly 70 million rand budgeted for legal expenses. Can she please just elaborate on how that is broken down between reactive and proactive legal costs? It does seem to be an immense amount of money, and I'd just like the committee to have some more insight into how you expect to spend that money. And then the third question is relating to Advocate Boyhang talking about the legislative amendments. He didn't really talk about what those amendments look like. What is he expecting the Act to be changed to do? That's all I have for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chance. Andre, is there any other hands for follow-up questions?
No further hands, Ms. Motsukatsi.
Okay, I think that was the last one. Can I then give for responses so that we can now close the meeting?
Sorry, Chair, just a point of clarity. The budget is 270 million rand up until 2029. That's the legal services costs, not the cost of the department, but the actual expenditure on legal costs, 270 million rand up until 2029. How is that money going to be spent?
Thank you, Mr. Chance.
All right. No, Chair, can I come in from NGB?
Yes, you may come in.
No, I think Chair, the Honorable Chance, is it Chance? Yes. Look, the issue of the taxation, the 20%. I think that the response by the CFO was based also obviously on the understanding that there is an illegal component of it that we are putting systems to deal with at this particular point in time. Otherwise, the issue of the online, remember that the legislation, as I had indicated before, does not provide for online gambling. Per se, it does not allow interactive gambling. So, in a sense, the taxation of that would be a taxation of what would be coming in as a new taxation, which was never provided for, I think, when the National Gambling Act came into play at a certain point in time. But as I indicated, we are actually making our own contribution and engagement on the taxation issues together with the department there. I thought that the DDG Evelyn would have made some input there, but in a sense, we're engaging with them in terms of the issues of online gambling taxation and the issue of the interactive gambling, including aspects that relate to the unlicensed operators, so to speak. So we do understand the broad scope of it, but I think that the CF was discussing mainly the issue of the unlicensed operators.
Thank you very much. Andre, can I now proceed to close the meeting unless the chairperson is around?
Ms. Mutsukatsi, there's still...
we haven't had the questions answered yet.
Okay,
Sorry.
there are follow-up questions, so you need the responses. Okay.
Chair, thank you very much. We have looked at the budget line items for the projections for legal fees. I think it's 26, 27, 70.3, 27, 28, 76.8, and 28, 29, 80.2. I'm not sure if Advocate Boyhang is able to respond to that. Alternatively, Chair, we could come back with a written response on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thanks, Honorable Chance, for those follow-up questions. And may I beg your indulgence to revert with respect to the breakdown. But as far as I am listening, it's an addition of the 3 years, 3 outer years, which is also including the legal fees for the RFP for the 4th license. But we will provide a detailed response and breakdown on how that monies are to be expended for that period. In respect of the proposed amendments, I am not going to delve into the details, save to indicate that the purpose of the amendments of the Lotteries Act with its regulations mainly is to reduce administrative inefficiencies to enhance accessibility for grant applicants. Because if you look at the current grant application process, it presents significant barriers due to excessive paperwork, long processing times, and redundant requirements. As I said, that the last time they were amended was in 2013. So it's been a substantial amount of years that has fluxed since they were amended. So these challenges, Honorable Chance, they hinder applicants, particularly smaller organizations and emerging organizations, from accessing funds efficiently. Therefore, the proposed changes aim to eliminate mainly unnecessary red tape. It aims to improve turnaround times by the NLC and to incorporate modern technological advancements, since we are living in in the era of 4IR, particularly on online application system. Therefore, we'll be leveraging on various application programming interfaces for compliance verification. And the intended purpose of the amendments will align the Lotteries Act with the government broader digital transformation initiatives with the aim of improving efficiency, the aim of improving transparency and accessibility. And at high level, the issues that we've identified are that there's excessive administrative burden with the current legislation and the regulations. There's lack of digital integration. There's delayed processing and disbursements. We also must keep in mind of the latest developments related to data privacy and security considerations, and the introduction of the new or proposed amendments will mainly address issues of online application system, which is not in the regulations currently. The API, as I spoke about them being integrated for compliance verification. Simplification of requirements as well is being suggested with the intention of reducing red tape. Time-bound processing and transparent communication is one of the suggestions. Enhanced oversight, data security, and other issues. So I was just summarizing some of the issues that have found expression in the memos of objects, both related to the legislation as well as the regulations, which, as I said, is or are being attended to by the DTIC. But the details lies in those documents. If this committee requires those documents to be presented, they could be easily availed. I thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Chairperson?
Andre? Yes, are we
Chairperson,
through?
we have not concluded the business of today, Chair, but seeing that the chairperson is not on the platform, we were supposed to consider the committee program. And may I propose that we, if the committee so wish, that we reconvene just tomorrow morning for an hour just to consider the program, Chair, if that's in order with the committee, to ensure that most members are on the platform when we discuss the program.
Okay, Andre.
Chair, also just a reminder for the members that will be traveling to Japan on Friday, we will also then do a short brief on the status and all matters relating to that tomorrow, Chair. But we'll, in the meantime, we'll also provide information to them via email until tomorrow, Chair, if that's in order.
Fine, Andre.
Then, Chair, you may then conclude the business of the day, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Let me take this opportunity once more to actually appreciate the presentations that has been presented by the NGB and the NLC. Thank you so much for the work that you have been doing and also the progress that you have been reporting on. Thank you also for honorable members present in the meeting and the time that you have been spending to be part of this meeting. And to everyone, the presenters in the meeting and everyone in the meeting who have been assisting in giving answers to questions that has been asked by members, thank you so much. The chairperson of the NLC, thank you for being part of this meeting. And thanks to everyone in the meeting. Thank you so much. And this meeting is officially closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honourable members.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.